Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the last scion of a primordial dragon bloodline, Naruto x Ahsoka Tano. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. An unstoppable force met an immovable object in the heart of a raging war. The skies of Ryloth, a world scarred by the relentless machinery of the Clone Wars, were a canvas of fiery explosions and the crisscrossing green and red of turbolaser fire. Below, on the scorched plains, the grand army of the Republic clashed with the unending tide of the separatist droid army. In the epicenter of this maelstrom, two figures, beacons of light in the encroaching darkness, fought back to back. Jedi Master Aayla Secura, her blue skin a stark contrast to the crimson soil, moved with a dancer's grace, her lightsaber a whirlwind of cerulean energy that deflected blaster bolts and sundered metal with equal ease. Beside her, Ahsoka Tano, a Togruta barely out of her adolescence yet a veteran of 100 battles, wielded her wind-green blades with a ferocity that belied her years. They were pushed back, inch by agonizing inch, the sheer weight of the droid numbers threatening to overwhelm them. Aayla, her senses extending through the Force, felt the wavering morale of the clone troopers, their disciplined resolve beginning to crack under the strain. "Anakin, we need that air support now," she projected through her comlink, her voice a calm island in the ocean of chaos. From the cockpit of a Republic gunship, Anakin Skywalker's voice crackled back, laced with the static of battle and his own brand of reckless confidence. "I'm a little busy at the moment, Aayla, but don't worry, I've got a good feeling about this." Aayla sighed, a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Anakin's good feelings were often a prelude to something spectacular. And just as often, something spectacularly dangerous. But today, the Force felt different. A tremor, a subtle yet profound disturbance that had nothing to do with the clashing armies. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being stretched thin, ready to tear. And then it did. A silent scream echoed not in their ears, but in their minds, a psychic shock. Avenue that sent a ripple of confusion through the battlefield. Droids faltered in their relentless advance, their photoreceptors flickering. Clone troopers stumbled, clutching their helmets. Aayla and Ahsoka staggered, their connection to the Force momentarily severed by a wave of raw, untamed energy. High above the battlefield, the sky began to bleed. A tear in the fabric of space, a swirling vortex of impossible colors, opened with a soundless roar. It was a wound in the universe, and from it, something fell. It was a man, or at least, he had the shape of one. He was clad in what looked like a tattered orange and black uniform. His hair a riot of sun-bleached blonde. He fell through the sky like a meteor, leaving a trail of golden energy in his wake. He was unconscious, his body limp, but even in his descent, he radiated an aura of immense power, a power that was both terrifying and strangely familiar. He crashed into the heart of the droid army, the impact sending a shockwave of golden energy that vaporized everything within a 100-meter radius. A perfect circle of destruction, a testament to the raw power contained within the falling figure. The battlefield fell silent, the cacophony of war replaced by an eerie stillness. Both sides, Republic and Separatist, stared at the epicenter of the blast, at the figure now lying in the center of a newly formed crater. He stirred, a groan escaping his lips. He pushed himself up, his movements slow and disoriented. He looked at his hands, then at the carnage around him, his cerulean eyes wide with confusion. He had no memory of how he had gotten here, no understanding of the strange metal soldiers that surrounded him. His last memory was of a blinding light, a searing pain, and then, nothing. The droids, their programming reasserting itself, turned their blasters towards the newcomer. A voice, cold and metallic, crackled from one of the command droids. "Target unidentified lifeform. Open fire." 1,000 red blaster bolts converged on the figure in the crater. But they never reached him. A golden aura, a swirling vortex of energy, erupted from him, a protective shield that deflected the blaster fire in all directions. The figure stood, his eyes now blazing with a golden light. He was no longer confused. He was angry. He roared, a sound that was not entirely human, a guttural cry that echoed with the power of 1,000 storms. The golden energy around him coalesced, forming the spectral image of a colossal, nine-tailed fox. It was a creature of myth and legend, a being of pure, unadulterated power. The droids were torn apart, their metal bodies shredded by invisible claws, their circuits fried by waves of golden energy. The ground shook, the very air crackled with power. In the span of a few heartbeats, a significant portion of the droid army was reduced to scrap metal. Ayla and Ahsoka could only watch in stunned silence, their lightsabers held loosely in their hands. The power emanating from the STR. Anger was unlike anything they had ever felt before. It was like the Force, but wilder, more primal, untamed by the strictures of the Jedi or the Sith. It was the Force in its purest, most chaotic form. The stranger stood amidst the destruction, his chest heaving, the golden aura slowly receding. He looked at the remaining droids, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He was about to charge, to finish what he had started, when a voice, calm and steady, cut through the air. That's enough. It was Ayla. She had deactivated her lightsaber and was walking towards him, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. Ahsoka, after a moment's hesitation, did the same. The stranger tensed, his eyes narrowing. He saw the strange glowing swords they carried, the way they held themselves with a warrior's poise. He saw them as a threat. Stay back, he warned, his voice a low growl. I don't know who you are, but I won't be taken. Ayla stopped a few meters away from him, her gaze soft and understanding. We don't want to hurt you. We are Jedi. We are here to help. The stranger scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Help. I've had enough of help to last a lifetime. He was Naruto Uzumaki, a name that had once been a curse. Then a legend. He was a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village, the Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox, the hero of the Fourth Great Ninja War. He was supposed to be dead, sacrificed to seal away a goddess from another dimension. And yet, here he was, in a world that was not his own, surrounded by strangers who looked at him with a mixture of awe and fear. Ahsoka, ever the more impulsive of the two, stepped forward. Who are you? What was that creature? Naruto's eyes hardened. That's none of your business. Now, tell me where I am, and how I can get back to my own world. Ayla answered, her voice still calm and reassuring. You are on the planet Ryloth. As for your world, I do not know, but we can help you find the answers you seek. The Jedi Order has vast knowledge of the galaxy. Perhaps we can help you find your way home. Naruto was silent for a long moment, his eyes scanning the two women before him. He could sense no malice in them, only a genuine curiosity and a hint of caution. He was alone, in a world he did not understand, with enemies on all sides. He needed allies, even temporary ones. Fine, he said, the golden light in his eyes finally fading. I'll go with you, but if you try anything, I'll show you what real power looks like. Ayla nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. I have no doubt that you would. As they made their way back to the Republic lines, Naruto couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He was a long way from home, a stranger in a strange land. But as he looked at the two women walking beside him, he also felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as alone as he thought. The journey back to the Republic cruiser was a tense one. The clone troopers, who had witnessed Naruto's destructive power firsthand, gave him a wide berth. Their white helmets turning to follow him as he walked. Naruto ignored them, his attention focused on the two Jedi who flanked him. He was still wary of them, ninja instincts screaming at him to be on his guard. But he also couldn't deny the sense of calm that emanated from them, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy that churned within him. Once aboard the cruiser, they were taken to a briefing room. Anakin Skywalker was waiting for them, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. He was a handsome man, wit, a roguish charm that Naruto suspected was often used to his advantage. But behind the easy smile, Naruto could sense a darkness, a simmering anger that was carefully kept in check. So, Anakin said, his eyes fixed on Naruto. You're the one who caused all the commotion. Naruto met his gaze without flinching. I was defending myself. Your metal soldiers attacked me first. They're droids, Anakin corrected, and they're the enemy. You did us a favor by taking them out. But that still doesn't explain what you are, or where you came from. Naruto's jaw tightened. He was tired of the questions. Tired of being treated like some kind of freak. I told your friends, I don't know how I got here. And what I am is none of your concern. Anakin's smile faded, his eyes narrowing. It is my concern. And when someone with your kind of power just appears out of nowhere on a Republic battlefield. For all I know, you could be a new kind of Sith weapon. The tension in the room crackled, thick and heavy. Naruto's hand instinctively went to the pouch on his back, where he kept his kunai. He was ready for a fight, ready to unleash the full power of the Nine Tails if he had to. But before the situation could escalate, Ayla stepped between them, her presence a calming balm on their frayed nerves. Anakin, that's enough. He is not our enemy. The Force is strong with him, but it is not the dark side. Anakin looked at Ayla, his expression softening slightly. The Force may be strong with him, but it's different. I've never felt anything like it. It is the dragon's flow, a new voice said, soft and melodic. A Togruta female, older than Ahsoka, had entered the room, her presence radiating a quiet authority. She was Shakti, a member of the Jedi High Council. An ancient text speaks of it, a raw, untamed aspect of the Force, connected to the very lifeblood of the universe. She turned her gaze to Naruto, her eyes filled with a mixture of awe and reverence. You are a scion of the dragon bloodline, are you not? A descendant of the Celestials themselves. Naruto was taken aback. The Celestials, he had never heard of them. But the dragon's flow, it was a fitting description for the power that coursed through his veins. The power he had inherited from his mother, a member of the Uzumaki clan, who were themselves descendants of a long-forgotten line of dragon sages. I don't know about any Celestials, Naruto said, his voice cautious, but my clan has always had a special connection to the energy of the world. Shakti nodded, a knowing smile on her lips. The dragon's flow. It has been millennia since a scion of your bloodline has been seen in this galaxy. Your arrival is a momentous occasion. Anakin scoffed. Momentous or catastrophic, someone with his kind of power could tip the balance of the war. The Separatists would do anything to get their hands on him. Which is why he must stay with us, Shakti said, her gaze unwavering. We will protect him, and in turn, perhaps he can help us understand this ancient power that has been reawakened. And so, Naruto Uzumaki, the last scion of a primordial dragon bloodline, found himself an unlikely guest of the Jedi Order. He was a stranger in a strange land, a being of immense power in a galaxy at war. He did not know what the future held, but one thing was certain, the galaxy would never be the same. The dragon had awakened, and its roar would be heard across the stars. The days that followed were a blur of new experiences for Naruto. He was given a room on the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, a place of owering spires and serene gardens that was a world away from the war-torn battlefields he had grown accustomed to. He was treated with a mixture of curiosity and awe by the Jedi, who had only ever read about his kind in ancient texts. He was a living legend, a relic from a forgotten age, and he hated it. He spent most of his time in the Jedi archives, poring over ancient texts and star charts, trying to find any mention of his own world, of the elemental nations. But it was a fruitless search. He was in a different galaxy, a different reality altogether. He was well and truly lost. His only solace was the company of Ahsoka. She was the only one who didn't treat him like some kind of deity or a weapon to be studied. She saw him for what he was, a lonely, homesick young man who was struggling to come to terms with his new reality. They would often spar in the Jedi training rooms, their clashing blades a form of communication that transcended words. Ahsoka was a skilled duelist, her movements quick and precise. But she was no match for Naruto, who moved with a fluidity and unpredictability that was unlike anything she had ever seen. He was a whirlwind of motion, his every strike a blur of orange and black. You're holding back, she said one day, after he had disarmed her for the 10th time. I can feel it, you're not using that golden energy. Naruto deactivated his own training saber, a simple wooden staff that he had fashioned for himself. You wouldn't be able to handle it if I did. Ahsoka's leku twitched in annoyance. Don't underestimate me, Naruto. I'm a Jedi Knight. I've faced down Sith Lords and armies of droids. I think I can handle a little bit of golden energy. Naruto sighed, a small smile playing on his lips. He admired her spirit, her unwavering determination. It reminded him of her. The thought of Sakura sent a pang of loneliness through him, a sharp, stabbing pain that he had been trying so hard to ignore. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the here and now. It's not about underestimating you, Ahsoka. It's about not wanting to hurt you. The dragon's flow, it's not like the Force. It's wild, chaotic. If I lose control, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Ahsoka had seen what he was capable of on Ryloth. She had seen the raw, destructive power that he held in check. Then teach me, she said, her voice soft yet firm. Teach me how to control it. Teach me how to feel the dragon's flow like you do. Naruto was taken aback. He had never thought of himself as a teacher. He had always been the one learning, the one struggling to control the power within him. But as he looked into Ahsoka's determined eyes, he saw a kindred spirit, a fellow warrior who was not afraid of power, but sought to understand it. And so, their training began. It was not the structured, disciplined training of the Jedi, but a more instinctual, chaotic affair. Naruto taught Ahsoka how to feel the dragon's flow, how to let it guide her movements. How to become one with the raw energy of the universe. It was a difficult process. Ahsoka was used to the Jedi's calm, meditative approach to the Force. Naruto's methods were the complete opposite. He taught her to embrace her emotions, to let her passion fuel her power. He taught her that there was no light or dark side, only the dragon's flow, and it was up to her to decide how to use it. Slowly but surely, Ahsoka began to change. Her connection to the Force deepened. Her movements in combat became more fluid, more unpredictable. She was still a Jedi, but she was also something more. She was a warrior who walked the line between the light and the dark, a true master of the Force in all its forms. And as they trained together, a bond began to form between them, a bond that was deeper than friendship. Stronger than any alliance. It was a bond forged in the crucible of shared experience, in the quiet moments of understanding that passed between them without words. Naruto found himself drawn to her fierce spirit, her unwavering loyalty, her compassionate heart. She was a beacon of light in his dark and lonely world, a reminder that even in a galaxy far, far away, he could still find a reason to fight. A reason to live. He didn't know what the future held for them, or if he would ever find his way back home. But as he looked at Ahsoka, her face illuminated by the soft glow of her lightsaber, he knew one thing for certain: he was no longer alone. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. He had found a new home, a new family. And he would protect it with every fiber of his being, with every ounce of the dragon's power that flowed through his veins. For he was Naruto Uzumaki, the last scion of the dragon bloodline, and his story was just beginning. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Serpent's Shadow. The sterile serenity of the Jedi Temple was a gilded cage. Naruto Uzumaki, for all the quiet respect and academic curiosity he received, felt the unseen bars pressing in. He was a creature of the wild, of open skies and the scent of rain on damp earth, not of polished corridors and hushed meditation chambers. The dragon's flow, the raw, living energy that was his birthright, coiled restlessly within him, yearning for a challenge greater than parrying Ahsoka's training sabers. He found a kindred spirit in her caged energy, the Toger. Yuta's natural predatory grace constrained by the rigid doctrines of the Order. Their training sessions had become the focal point of his existence, a shared rebellion against the placid routine. They stood in the temple's highest training veranda, a circular platform open to the coruscant sky lanes, the perpetual twilight of the city planet casting long shadows. A light, acidic rain hissed against the invisible energy shield arching overhead. Ahsoka, her Shoto and standard lightsaber held in her signature reverse grip, was a blur of motion, her green blades leaving phantom trails in the humid air. She was faster now, her attacks less predictable, flowing with a nascent understanding of the chaotic energy Naruto had awoken in her. You're anticipating, not reacting, Naruto's voice cut through the hum of her blades. He stood perfectly still, a simple wooden bakken held loosely in one hand. He hadn't moved a muscle, yet Ahsoka's most aggressive flurry had met nothing but empty air. The Force tells you where I will be. The flow is where I am. Forget the future. Be present. Frustration tightened her features. It's not that simple, Naruto. The Jedi way is to be mindful of the future, to see the connections. And that's why a Sith can always fool you, he retorted, his tone sharp but not unkind. He took a single, flowing step, and was suddenly behind her. The tip of his Bakken Ri steadied gently against the back of her neck before she could even register his movement. They use your foresight against you. They show you a future you fear, and you walk right into their trap trying to prevent it. The dragon doesn't plan. It is. It burns, it strikes, it endures. He withdrew the Bakken, and Ahsoka let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She turned, her montrals drooping slightly. I feel it, sometimes. A current, beneath the force. It's wild. It doesn't listen. You don't make it listen, he explained, his cerulean eyes seeming to glow in the dim light. You join its song. You let it carry you. He gestured to the sprawling city below, a galaxy of lights and movement. It's in everything. The speeders, the people, the rain. It's the chaos. The Jedi seek to order it. The Sith seek to dominate it. The dragon just is. Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of two figures. Master Shakti in a tall, imposing Keldor Jedi Master, his face hidden behind an Antioch's mask and goggles. Plo Koon. Naruto recognized him from the council briefings he'd been forced to attend. Naruto Uzumaki. Padawan Tano. Plo Koon's voice, distorted by his mask, was a deep, resonant baritone that commanded attention. I apologize for the interruption, but your unique perspectives are required. Shakti offered a graceful nod. We have received a disturbing report from the Outer Rim. From the planet Felucia, a separatist science outpost, believed to be developing a new biological weapon, has gone silent. Our last transmission was a garbled mess of screaming and strange energy readings. Plo Koon's dark eyes settled on Naruto. The energy signature is unlike anything our instruments have recorded. It is chaotic, powerful, and bears a disturbing resemblance to the readings we detected during your arrival on Ryloth. Naruto's blood ran cold. Another tear in reality, or something else. Someone like me. That is what we must ascertain, Shakti replied. Ayla Secura is already on site with the 327th Star Corps, but the jungle is uncooperative. The wildlife has become unnaturally aggressive, and conventional sensors are useless. The very planet seems to be fighting back. Ahsoka straightened, her weariness replaced by the sharp focus of a soldier. You want us to investigate the energy source. Precisely, Plo Koon confirmed. Your growing sensitivity to this dragon's flow, combined with Naruto's innate mastery, makes you our only viable reconnaissance team. This is not a frontline assault. It is a mission of stealth and information gathering. You will infiltrate the jungle, locate the source of the disturbance, identify its nature, and report back. Avoid engagement unless absolutely necessary. Naruto felt a savage grin spread across his face. Stealth, infiltration, a hostile jungle. This was a language he understood far better than Jedi philosophy. When do we leave? Felucia was a world drowning in life. As their stealth transport, the Whispering Shadow, descended through the atmosphere, the viewport was filled with a riot of color that was both beautiful and deeply menacing. Fungi the size of starships pulsed with soft, bioluminescent light, casting eerie glows upon gargantuan, translucent flora. The air, thick and humid even through the ship's advanced filtration system, smelled of alien pollen, damp earth, and decay. It was a world that was constantly growing, consuming, and dying, all at once. They set down in a clearing miles from the last known coordinates of the separatist outpost. The moment the ramp lowered, the sheer sensory overload of Felucia hit them. The air was a cacophony of insectal chirps, reptilian hisses, and the groans of colossal plants shifting under their own weight. Stay sharp, Naruto murmured, his senses expanding, tasting the air. The dragon's flow was here, but it was different from the energy on Coruscant. It was raw, primal, and deeply, furiously angry. It felt wounded. The planet itself is hostile. Ahsoka nodded, her twin sabers ignited, their green glow seeming pale against the vibrant, overwhelming colors of the jungle. I can feel it. It's like the whole world is screaming in pain. They moved through the undergrowth, Naruto taking the lead. He moved with a silence that unnerved the clone pilot who had dropped them off. He was not simply walking, he was flowing through the jungle. His feet never seeming to snap a twig, his form blending seamlessly with the shifting shadows cast by the giant mushrooms. Ahsoka, a capable warrior in her own right, found herself struggling to keep up with his phantom-like passage. He was in his element. Hours passed. The jungle was a labyrinth of lethal beauty. Carnivorous plants snapped at them with vine-like tendrils, and creatures that were a nightmarish blend of insect and reptile stalked them from the canopy. Naruto dispatched them with brutal efficiency, a flash of a kunai here, a precise, chakra-enhanced strike there. He moved with the deadly grace of a predator, a stark contrast to the more defensive, flowing forms of Ahsoka's lightsaber combat. They found the first sign of the Separatists an hour before dusk. A wrecked AAT, its metallic hull corroded and covered in a rapidly growing, rust-colored fungus. The battle droids inside were mangled, not by blaster fire, but as if they had been torn apart by immense physical force. No scorch marks, Ahsoka observed, her voice low. Whatever did this, it wasn't a lightsaber or a blaster. Naruto knelt, placing a hand on the corrupted metal. He closed his eyes, concentrating. The energy is strong here. It's poison, a corruption of the life force. He looked deeper into the jungle, his gaze fixed on a distant, pulsating glow. The source is that way, and it's getting stronger. As they pressed on, the landscape became more grotesque. The flora was twisted into unnatural shapes, and the air grew thick with a sweet, cloying scent of decay. They found more destroyed droids, and then, the bodies of clone troopers from Ayla's unit. They too were torn apart, their armor breached by what looked like massive claws. "We need to warn Master Sakura," Ahsoka said, her voice tight with grief for the fallen soldiers. "We warn her after we know what she's facing," Naruto countered, his face grim. "Walking in blind is how you get your whole squad killed." They finally reached the perimeter of the Separatist base, a prefabricated structure now half swallowed by the corrupted jungle. The defensive turrets were silent, and the main gate was torn from its hinges. The place was a tomb. "This feels wrong," Ahsoka whispered, her hand resting on the hilt of her saber. "Too quiet. It's a trap," Naruto stated simply. "An obvious one. So we go around." "No," Naruto said, a dangerous glint in his eye. "We spring it." Before Ahsoka could protest, he blurred into motion, vanishing into the shadows of the ravaged gateway. Taking a deep breath, Ahsoka followed, her senses on high alert. The inside of the base was a charnel house. Droids and Separatist personnel, mostly Nemodians, lay dead in the corridors, their bodies showing the same signs of brutal violence. But it was the central laboratory that held the true horror. A massive stasis tube, shattered from the inside, stood at the center of the room. Its transparasteel shards littered the floor, and a viscous black ichor coated everything. In the middle of the ichor, a strange, plant-like organism pulsed with a sickly violet light. It was the source of the corruption. It wasn't the plant that drew their attention. It was the woman standing beside it. She was tall and wiry, clad in custom-fitted Mandalorian armor painted a stark, midnight blue, adorned with the sigil of a coiled serpent. Her helmet was tucked under one arm, revealing a face that was a tapestry of sharp angles and old scars. Her hair was a shock of silver, cut short and practical, and her eyes, the color of molten gold, watched them with a predatory stillness. A heavy blaster pistol was strapped to her thigh, and a wickedly curved vibroblade was slung across her back. She held a datapad in her hand, seemingly unconcerned by their sudden appearance. "Took you long enough," she said, her voice a low, smoky contralto laced with a core world accent clipped by years in the outer rim. "I was beginning to think the Republic's new pet was all bark and no bite." Naruto and Ahsoka instantly fell into defensive stances. "Who are you?" Ahsoka demanded, her green blades humming to life. The woman raised a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "The name's Lyra Vex, bounty hunter. And before you get any heroic ideas, Jedi, I'm not your enemy." She gestured with her datapad towards the pulsating plant. "That is." Naruto kept his eyes on her, his senses screaming a warning. This woman was dangerous, not because of any power he could sense, but because of the complete absence of it. She was a void, a black hole of intent, her presence masked by what he could only assume was sheer, indomitable will and training. "You know what that thing is." "I know what it was made from," Lyra corrected, her golden eyes narrowing. "It's a genetically engineered parasite, a separatist super weapon designed to devour all life on a planet and repurpose its biomass. Code named the Felucian devourer. But their lead scientist, a Twi'lek named Drive, Varl, got greedy. He tried to infuse it with a sample of an anomaly he'd been studying. She finally looked directly at Naruto, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something in her gaze, a calculating, analytical curiosity. An energy source of immense power. Something he believed was the key to creating a weapon that could consume not just planets, but the Force itself. He used your energy, Dragon Child. The energy you bled into this dimension when you arrived. The revelation hit Naruto like a physical blow. His power, twisted and corrupted to create this abomination. The rage he felt was a physical thing, a hot, coiling serpent in his gut. The golden energy of the dragon's flow began to leak from him, his eyes shifting to a slitted, feral gold. And you, Ahsoka pressed, keeping her lightsabers trained on Lyra. What's your stake in this? The bounty on Dr. Varl. Lyra let out a short, humorless laugh. Varl's dead. The parasite. Repurposed. Him first. No, my contract is a bit more esoteric. I was hired by a private party to retrieve the doctor's research data and terminate the experiment. With extreme prejudice. She held up the datapad. Data acquired. Now comes the prejudice. Suddenly, the plant pulsed violently, and the black ichor on the floor began to writhe and coalesce. Tendrils of corrupted biomass, tutted with razor-sharp thorns and dripping with acid, shot up from the floor, lashing out at them. Lyra Vex moved with blinding speed. She didn't have the Force-enhanced grace of a Jedi, but a brutal, practiced efficiency. She drew her blaster and fired a volley of crimson bolts, each one precisely striking the base of a tendril, causing it to explode in a shower of black goo. At the same time, she dove into a roll, coming up with her vibroblade in hand, the weapon humming with deadly energy as she sliced through another tendril that had tried to flank her. Ahsoka was a whirlwind of green light, deflecting and cutting. Her movements a beautiful, deadly dance. But for every tendril she destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. They were being overwhelmed. Naruto, however, was a force of nature unleashed. He let the rage flow through him, not as a blind fury, but as a focused, cleansing fire. He didn't bother with kunai or taijutsu. He simply became the storm. A golden aura erupted around him, forming the spectral head of the nine-tailed fox, which roared a silent, psychic challenge at the abomination. He thrust his hand forward, and a massive claw of pure, golden energy materialized, slamming into the central mass of the parasite. The creature shrieked, a sound that was both biological and psychic, a wave of pure agony and malice that sent Ahsoka stumbling back, clutching her head. Lyra grunted, bracing herself, her face a mask of grim determination. But Naruto was unmoved. He walked forward, the golden claw pressing the parasite back, the very air sizzling around him. "You took my power," he growled, his voice a distorted echo of his own and the ancient beast within him. "You twisted it. You corrupted it. You have no right to exist." He clenched his fist, and the golden claw contracted, crushing the central core of the parasite. The creature let out one final, deafening screech before exploding, sending a shockwave of violet and black energy washing through the facility. The corrupted plant life in the immediate vicinity withered and died, turning to black ash. Silence descended, broken only by the panting of the three warriors. The golden aura around Naruto receded, leaving him standing in the center of the now inert ichor, his chest heaving. Lyra Vex holstered her blaster, her calculating gaze sweeping over Naruto. The professional mask was back in place, but he could see a new, more intense level of interest in her eyes. "Impressive," she stated, her tone flat. "The client will want to hear about this." "What client?" Ahsoka asked, her lightsabers still ignited, her suspicion of the bounty hunter not remotely abated. Lyra gave a thin, predatory smile. "Someone who has a vested interest in unique, powerful artifacts and individuals. Someone who pays very, very well for information on things that can challenge both the Republic and the Separatists." She tapped her comlink. "Vex to Serpent's kiss. Extraction protocol initiated. Got the package, and a little something extra." Before they could question her further, a low hum filled the air, and a sleek, angular ship, the same midnight blue as her armor, descended through the hole in the laboratory's roof. Its ramp lowered, and Lyra began to walk towards it. "Wait," Naruto called out, You can't just leave. We have questions. Lyra paused on the ramp, looking back at them. You're not my employers, dragon child. My business here is concluded. She gave Naruto one last, lingering look, a look that was a complex mix of professional appraisal, scientific curiosity, and something else, something he couldn't quite decipher. But I have a feeling our business is just beginning. Try not to get yourselves killed before our next meeting. It would be a waste of potential. With that, the ramp closed, and the ship, the Serpent's Kiss, ascended into the lurid Felucian sky, vanishing as silently as it had arrived. Naruto and Ahsoka were left alone in the ruins of the laboratory, the Saint. Inch of ozone and dead alien matter hanging heavy in the air. The immediate threat was gone, but a host of new, more complicated questions had taken its place. Who was Lyra Vex? Who was her mysterious client? And what other horrors had been born from the energy he had unwittingly unleashed upon this galaxy? Ahsoka finally deactivated her lightsabers, the sudden silence deafening. She looked at Naruto, her expression a mixture of awe at his power and deep concern. Naruto, what have we gotten ourselves into? Naruto stared up at the sky where Lyra's ship had disappeared, his hands clenched into tight fists. He didn't have an answer. He only knew that his peaceful exile was over. He had been found. The shadows were moving, and he, the last dragon, was now a piece in a galactic game he didn't understand. And he was certain Lyra Vex would be watching his every move. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Whispers of the Undercity. The return to Coruscant was a jarring transition from the feral, life-choked jungles of Felucia. The air in the Jedi Temple, once a symbol of serene contemplation, now felt sterile, recycled, and unnervingly silent. Naruto stood before the Jedi High Council, the circular chamber and arena of judgment. The 12 masters, seated in their high-backed chairs, regarded him with a potent mixture of awe, apprehension, and outright suspicion. Ahsoka stood a respectful pace behind him, her presence a small, familiar comfort in the heart of this gilded cage. Ayla Secura, her arm in a Bacta-infused cast from an encounter with the corrupted Felucian fauna, stood with them. Her report having preceded their arrival. Master Mace Windu, his dark eyes hard and uncompromising, was the first to speak, his voice resonating with authority. Your report is troubling, Uzumaki. You claim this bio-weapon was created using your energy, yet you have no knowledge of how it was acquired. You engage a high-level bounty hunter, a person of interest to Republic intelligence for years, and you simply let her leave. Naruto met the Jedi Master's glare without flinching, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp. He was not a soldier to be reprimanded. I didn't let her do anything. She had a faster ship and better intel. And for the record, we stopped the weapon from consuming the planet. You're welcome. A low murmur rippled through the council. Naruto's bluntness was a foreign concept in this chamber of carefully chosen words. Obi-Wan Kenobi, stroking his beard thoughtfully, intervened with a calmer tone. Mace, his point is valid, if unpolished. He and Padawan Tano Suki, dead where an entire corps was struggling. The nature of the threat was unique. The question is not what they failed to do, but what we must do now. He turned his gaze to Naruto. This bounty hunter, Lyra Vex. You said her client was interested in unique, powerful artifacts and individuals. That description is broad, yet chillingly specific. It suggests a collector, someone with immense resources. A collector of power, Shakti added, her voice carrying a note of deep concern. The Sith have been known to hoard such things. Ancient holocrons, artifacts of great darkness. Or a third party. Plo Koon rumbled from behind his mask. The war has created a power vacuum. Many influential beings, outside the Republic and separatist spheres, seek to profit from the chaos. A weapon that can consume planets, or a being who can destroy armies single-handedly, would be the ultimate prize. Every eye in the room fell on Naruto. He hated it. He was not a prize. He was not a weapon. He was a shinobi, a protector, a person. But here, in this galaxy of endless war, he was seen as a strategic asset, a piece to be moved on a galactic chessboard. It was Grand Master Yoda who finally broke the heavy silence. His large eyes closed in concentration. A shadow, this client is. Hiding behind layers of intrigue. The bounty hunter, Vex, the thread we must pull. Find her, we must. Learn who holds her leash. Finding a ghost like Lyra Vex in the galactic underworld is next to impossible through official channels, Mace Windu countered, his skepticism evident. She has erased her tracks for a decade. Sending a Jedi strike team would be like using a sledgehammer to thread a needle. She would vanish. Then we do not send a sledgehammer, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the debate. Everyone looked at him. You want to find someone who lives in the shadows. You don't send soldiers in shining armor. You send shadows of your own. Ahsoka stepped forward, her loyalty to Naruto and her due tied to the order warring in her expression. Master, he's right. Vex operates in the criminal underworld. We need someone who understands that world. We need intelligence, not a frontal assault. Plo Koon nodded slowly. Padawan Tano and Naruto Uzumaki are our only assets who have seen Vex in person. They have faced her, and this unique energy that connects them. They are the logical choice for this mission. Send them into the underworld. Alone. Windu scoffed. The boy is a loose cannon, and the Padawan is still in training. It is too great a risk. A greater risk, is it, than allowing this unknown client to capture Naruto? Yoda opened his eyes, his gaze piercing. A weapon from his power, they have already made. Imagine what they would do with the source. No, the risk, we must take. To the lower levels, you will go. In secret, no clones, no official support. A whisper, you must be. Not a shout. Naruto felt a surge of grim satisfaction. This was a mission he understood. No rules of engagement, no Jedi dogma. Just a target and the freedom to achieve the objective. And where in the lower levels do we start looking for a ghost? Obi-Wan brought up a holographic star chart of Coruscant. A sphere of light composed of thousands of distinct layers. The underworld has its own power structures, its own economy. And the currency that truly matters is not credits, but information. If Vex needed a secure way to contact her client, or to purchase specialized gear for her ship, the Serpent's Kiss, she would have used an information broker. A slicer. And for a job this sensitive, she would need the best. He zoomed in on a notorious, perpetually shadowed district deep within the planet's structure. Level 1313. A cesspool of crime and contraband. If you want to find the best slicer, the kind a professional like Vex would trust, you start there. We have a name, a legend, really. No one has seen their face. They operate through dead drops and encrypted proxies. They call themselves the Ghost. The descent from the Jedi Temple to level 1313 was like falling from a heaven of polished marble into a hell of rusted durasteel and neon-choked smog. They traded their traditee, Onal robes and Naruto's distinctive orange jacket for worn, nondescript traveler's clothes. Ahsoka wore a hooded cloak that concealed her montrals, while Naruto pulled a similar hood over his bright blonde hair. They rode a public transit skiff, the vehicle growing progressively more grimy and crowded with each level they descended. The clean, filtered air of the upper levels was replaced by the stench of industrial coolants, ozone, and unidentifiable organic waste. The hum of respectable sky traffic gave way to the roar of unregulated swoop bikes and the percussive clang of heavy machinery factories that had not seen maintenance in centuries. By the time the skiff docked at the 1313 platform, they were immersed in a world of perpetual twilight, the only light coming from flickering holographic advertisements for cheap liquor, loan sharks, and off-world mercenary work. The sky was a myth here, a ceiling of pipes and conduits dripping with green-black slime. Charming place, Ahsoka muttered, her senses overwhelmed by the sheer density of desperation, anger, and fear that saturated the level. It was a dull, constant roar in the Force, a stark contrast to the focused malevolence of a Sith Lord. This was the ambient darkness of a forgotten world. Reminds me of home, Naruto said with a wry smile, but there was no humor in his eyes. He saw the faces in the crowd, the desperate, the predatory, the broken. He had grown up an outcast, and he recognized the look of people living on the margins. He felt more comfortable here than he ever had in the pristine halls of the temple. He moved with a newfound confidence. His shoulders relaxed, his gait blending in with the sullen shuffle of the crowd. They needed a starting point, a place to gather whispers about the ghost. Naruto's instincts led them to a cantina called the Glitch. The name was promising. The establishment was a cavernous space carved out of a derelict power conduit. The air was thick with smoke from exotic substances. And the noise was a deafening blend of alien languages, clinking glasses, and the throbbing beat of some percussive, synth-heavy music. Ahsoka was tense, her hand never straying far from the lightsaber hidden beneath her cloak. Her Jedi training screamed that this place was a nexus of danger. Naruto, however, seemed to thrive in the chaos. He casually leaned against the bar, which was sticky with spilled drinks, and ordered 2 glasses of something blue that fizzed ominously. "Drink up," he said, sliding a glass to her. "You look like a tourist. You need to look like you belong." She eyed the glass with suspicion. "What is it?" "No idea, but it smells better than the air outside." He took a sip, his face betraying no reaction. He scanned the room, his eyes missing nothing. He wasn't looking for a slicer. He was looking for the person who knew the slicer. Information brokers were paranoid. They wouldn't hang out in a place like this. But their clients, or the people who wanted to be their clients, would. His eyes landed on a Deveronian, his horned face split by a greedy smirk, trying to sell what were obviously fake memory chips to a nervous Rhodian. The Deveronian was a low-level information peddler. A bottom feeder. A perfect place to start. Naruto sauntered over, Ahsoka trailing in his wake like a nervous shadow. He placed a hand on the Deveronian's shoulder, his grip deceptively light. "Those chips won't even run a child's storybook, let alone the corporate secrets you're promising." The Deveronian spun around, his lips curling back to reveal sharp teeth. "Who in the blazes are you? This is a private conversation." 2 hulking Trandoshan thugs who had been flanking him took a menacing step forward. Naruto ignored the thugs, his smile never reaching his eyes. "I'm the guy who's going to save this poor Rhodian from getting his credits stolen. And in return, you're going to answer a question for me." The Deveronian laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You've got guts, smooth skin. My friends here are about to show you what they do with guts." The first Trandoshan threw a punch, a blow that could dent steel. Naruto didn't even seem to move. He simply shifted his weight, and the Trandoshan's fist flew past his head. Naruto's hand shot out, not in a punch, but with his fingers extended, striking the Trandoshan at the junction of his neck and shoulder. The massive reptile's eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed to the floor like a sack of stones, completely unconscious. The second Trandoshan paused, its reptilian brain processing what had just happened. Ahsoka tensed, ready to draw her saber, but Naruto gave a minute shake of his head. He wanted to handle this his way. The cantina had gone quiet, all eyes on their little drama. The second Trandoshan roared and charged. Naruto met the charge head-on. He ducked under a clumsy swing, his body flowing like water, and drove the palm of his hand into the creature's sternum. There was a dull thud, and a faint golden ripple of energy that only Ahsoka, with her force-attuned senses, could see. The Trandoshan skidded back several feet, gasping for air that wouldn't come, before toppling over, clutching its chest. Naruto turned back to the Deveronian, who had gone pale under his red skin. He dusted off his hands. "So, about my question, I'm looking for the ghost." The Deveronian swallowed hard, his greedy smirk replaced by a mask of pure terror. "The ghost. No one finds the ghost. The ghost finds you. Then how do I get the ghost's attention?" Naruto pressed, his voice dangerously soft. You need to prove you're worth their time. There's a data terminal in the old freight sector, Sector 7G. It's a dead drop. People leave messages, offerings. But the terminal is controlled by the Crates Fangs Syndicate. They take a cut of every deal. No one gets to the terminal without paying them tribute or spilling blood. Crates Fangs. Naruto repeated the name, filing it away. "Thank you for your cooperation." He patted the Deveronian on the cheek, then turned and walked out of the cantina, leaving a stunned silence and 2 unconscious Trandoshans in his wake. Oka hurried to catch up with him in the crowded walkway. "Was that really necessary? You could have used a mind trick." "A mind trick is a violation," Naruto said, his gaze fixed ahead. "And it's lazy. Down here, respect is earned. We just made a statement. We're not easy marks. That kind of news travels fast. Now, the Crates Fangs will be expecting us. And you think that's a good thing?" she asked, bewildered. "It's the best thing," he replied with a feral grin. "It means we don't have to go looking for them. They'll come to us." Sector 7G was even more derelict than the rest of 1313. It was a graveyard of abandoned cargo containers and rusting freight elevators, a maze of metal canyons shrouded in steam from broken pipes. The air hummed with the sound of failing power conduits. At the heart of the sector, just as the Deveronian had said, was a single, glowing data terminal, an island of technology in a sea of decay. And surrounding it were the crate's fangs. They were a motley crew of Weequay, Claytuinian, and Nikto thugs, armed with vibro axes and heavy blaster rifles. Their leader, a broad-shouldered Zabrok with faded facial tattoos and cybernetic arms, stood with his arms crossed, a cruel smile on his face. I heard some off-worlders were asking about the Ghost's terminal, the Zabrok bellowed, his voice echoing in the metallic canyon. This is our territory. You want to leave a message. The toll is 5,000 credits. Each. Naruto stepped forward into the dim light. We're not here to pay. We're here to make a withdrawal. The Zabrok laughed. A comedian. I'll tell you what. I'll waive the fee if you can get past my boys. Naruto looked at Ahsoka and gave a slight nod. Stay sharp. What followed was not a battle, but a symphony of controlled violence. The thugs charged, a wave of brute force and anger. Ahsoka was a phantom of green light, her cloak cast aside. She moved with the acrobatic grace of her Ataru style, a whirlwind of motion that was both beautiful and deadly. Her lightsabers hummed, deflecting blaster bolts back at their shooters, the sizzling sound of impact echoing through the sector. She never struck a killing blow, instead using precise cuts to disable weapons and disarm her opponents, or the flat of her blade to knock them unconscious. Naruto was something else entirely. He was chaos personified. He didn't use a weapon. He was the weapon. He flowed between the charging thugs, a blur of dark cloth and focused intent. He used their own momentum against them, redirecting a charge into a wall, twisting an arm to disarm a blaster, a single precise jab to a pressure point to disable another. He created two shadow clones, the technique so sudden and seamless that the thugs didn't know which one to shoot at. The clones acted as diversions, drawing fire and engaging multiple opponents at once, while the real Naruto systematically dismantled the gang's offensive. The Zabrok leader watched, his smile faltering, replaced by disbelief and then rage. He had underestimated them, severely. His cybernetic arms whirred as he activated their built-in weaponry, a repeating blaster on the right, a vibro blade on the left. Useless filth. I'll kill you myself. He fired a volley of blaster fire at Naruto, who simply created a wall of 3 shadow clones that took the blasts and dispersed into smoke. By the time the smoke cleared, Naruto was gone. Looking for me. Naruto's voice came from directly behind the Zabrok. The gang leader spun around, swinging his vibro blade in a wild arc. Naruto ducked under it, his hand glowing with a faint blue energy. He pressed his palm against the Zabrok's back, right over his power pack for the cybernetic arms. Rasengan, he whispered. There was no massive explosion. Just a contained vortex of swirling chakra that ground into the power pack with the force of a turbine. Sparks flew, circuits fried, and the Zabrok's expensive cybernetic arms went limp, smoking and useless. The Zabrok stared at his dead limbs in horror. Then at Naruto, who stood there with an impassive expression. You're loud, Naruto said. And you're in our way. He tapped the Zabrok on the forehead, and the hulking brute crumpled to the ground. Unconscious. The remaining thugs, seeing their leader defeated so easily, dropped their weapons and fled into the darkness. Silence fell over Sector 7G. Ahsoka deactivated her sabers, her breathing slightly heavy. You know, for someone who preaches about subtlety, you have a very loud way of making a point. Subtlety is about control, Naruto corrected, walking towards the glowing terminal. It's about choosing when to be silent, and when to be a storm. We needed to get the Ghost's attention. A gang war in their territory is a pretty loud knock on the door. He examined the terminal. The interface was protected by layers of heavy-duty encryption. It would take a master slicer weeks to get through it. Naruto placed his hand on the screen. He closed his eyes, not trying to hack the code, but to feel the energy. The dragon's flow was in everything, even technology. It was the flow of data, the pulse of electricity. He reached out with his own energy, not to break the encryption, but to talk to it, to persuade it. He found a loophole, a single line of corrupted code from a sloppy user, and poured his energy into it, widening the crack until the entire system shuddered and granted him access. The screen flickered and a simple, text-only interface appeared. Prove your worth. Naruto typed a single line. We took out the crate's fangs. Your terminal is secure. We need to find Lyra Vex. They waited. For a long minute, nothing happened. Then, a new line of text appeared. Lyra Vex is a shadow. Chasing her is a fool's errand. The data trail is cold. Naruto typed back. Then heated up. She used your services. We know she did. Find the trail. Name your price. Another pause. The ghost was considering. Ahsoka watched the screen, her nerves taut. This disembodied conversation was more unnerving than the fight had been. Price is not credits, the reply came. The Black Sun Syndicate has placed a bounty on me. They employ a slicer known as STATIC. He is hunting me through the net. Eliminate the hunter. In exchange, I will give you Vex's last known transaction log. 1 hour. A power relay station on level 1314. Come alone. The message blinked once. Then the terminal went dark, the encryption slamming back into place. Black Sun. We're talking about one of the biggest crime syndicates in the galaxy. Ahsoka exclaimed. This is getting more complicated by the minute. Good, Naruto said, turning away from the terminal. Complicated is interesting. And the come alone part. They're trying to separate us. It's a classic trap. It's a test, Naruto corrected. They want to see if I'm smart enough to see the trap, and strong enough to walk into it anyway. He looked at her, a serious expression on his face. This ghost is good, paranoid. We'll play it their way. Mostly. The power relay station on level 1314 was a cavernous structure filled with colossal transformers that buzzed with the energy of a captured star. The air crackled with electricity. And the magnetic fields were so strong they made your teeth ache. At the center of the main chamber was a raised command console, and sitting there, silhouetted against the glowing screens, was a figure. It was a young woman, perhaps a year or two older than Ahsoka. She had sharp, intelligent features, framed by short, dark hair with streaks of electric blue. Her eyes, a startling shade of violet, scanned her console with an intense, unwavering focus. She wore practical, tech-heavy clothing, with a custom-built datapad strapped to her wrist. This was not the shadowy, mysterious figure they had expected. She was real, and she was completely absorbed in her work. Naruto approached cautiously, his senses on high alert. He could feel Ahsoka, hidden in the rafters high above, a silent guardian. You're the ghost? Naruto asked, his voice calm. The woman didn't look up from her screen. The name's Lyra Vex. The ghost is just branding. Good for business. Her fingers flew across the holographic interface, lines of code scrolling past at an impossible speed. You're late. Static is already in my system. He's a clumsy brute, but he's persistent. He's Ying to triangulate my physical location. You want me to take him out, Naruto stated. I want you to provide a loud, physical distraction, she corrected, finally looking up at him. Her violet eyes were analytical, appraising him not as a warrior, but as a data point, an unexpected variable. Black Sun goons are already on their way here. Static got close enough to give them a general location. I need you to keep them off my back for about 5 minutes while I lock him out and scrub my signature. Can you handle that? Her tone was dismissive, as if she were talking to a hired bodyguard she wasn't particularly impressed with. The arrogance amused Naruto. 5 minutes, he said with a confident smirk. I think I can spare that. As if on cue, heavy footsteps echoed from the main entrance. A dozen Black Sun thugs, armed to the teeth, stormed into the chamber. There she is. Get the slicer. Their leader yelled. Alara's eyes widened slightly. Okay, maybe more than a dozen. My intel was off. Don't worry, Naruto said, cracking his knuckles. I'm good at improvising. He moved to intercept them, positioning himself between the thugs and Alara's console. He had promised Yoda he would be a whisper, but sometimes a whisper needed to be carried on the wind of a hurricane. The fight was fast and brutal. These were professional soldiers, better trained and better equipped than the crate's fangs. Naruto didn't hold back. He became a whirlwind of motion, his movements economical and devastating. He used shadow clones to create chaos, a Rasengan to shatter the floor and send a group of thugs tumbling. And his raw physical prowess to disarm and incapacitate the rest. From her perch, Ahsoka watched in awe. She had her sabers in hand, ready to intervene, but it wasn't necessary. Naruto was handling them with an ease that was almost contemptuous. As Naruto fought, Lyra was engaged in her own battle. On her screen, a digital war was raging. Her own code, represented by a flowing, ghost-like avatar, danced around the brute force attacks of static, a blocky, aggressive virus program. She was a fencer, parrying and riposting, laying traps, creating false data trails. Almost there. He's locked onto the primary power conduit, stupid. One of the thugs managed to get past Naruto, raising his blaster to fire at Lyra. Before he could pull the trigger, a green lightsaber ignited in the rafters. And a cloaked figure dropped down, landing silently behind the thug and knocking him out with the hilt of her blade. Lyra's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock as she saw Ahsoka. A Jedi. You brought a Jedi. Her voice was laced with betrayal and anger. She's with me, was all Naruto said, as he knocked out the last of the thugs. Now, Lyra shouted, her attention snapping back to her console. She typed a final, complex command. Got you. On the screen, her ghost avatar ensnared the blocky virus in a cage of light, then dragged it into a digital icon shaped like a trash bin. The connection was severed. She let out a long, shuddering breath and leaned back in her chair, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow. Hunter eliminated. She stood up and turned to face them, her violet eyes flashing with anger. The deal was you come alone. You lied to me. I came alone, Naruto said calmly. She just happened to be in the neighborhood. A necessary precaution. I don't work with Jedi, Lyra spat, her distrust a palpable force field around her. They're the lapdogs of the corrupt Senate, enforcing laws that keep people like me stuck in holes like this. We're not here to enforce any laws, Ahsoka said, deactivating her saber. We're here for the same reason you are. To find answers in the shadows. Lyra studied them for a long moment, her slicer's mind analyzing every detail. Every micro-expression. She looked at the dozen unconscious Black Sun soldiers, then at Naruto, who stood there looking completely unruffled. She had hired him for a 5-minute distraction. And he had delivered a one-man army. And then there was the Jedi, who had revealed herself only to protect her. A deal's a deal, she said finally, her voice losing some of its edge. She tapped her wrist pad. And a data file transferred to Naruto's borrowed datapad. This is everything I have on Lyra Vex. Encrypted transaction logs for high-grade ship parts, untraceable fuel, and one purchase that stands out. A specialized biostasis pod, military grade. Bought through a shell corporation called Athelred Industries. The trail goes cold there. Athelred is a ghost company, no assets, no personnel. A financial black hole. Athelred Industries, Naruto repeated the name. It was a start, a real lead. Suddenly, the whole station groaned, and the lights flickered violently. A new voice, cold and synthetic, echoed through the chamber. Target identified. The asset known as the Ghost. You were in violation of Black Sun directives. Surrender for termination. From the shadows, a new figure emerged. It was a droid, but unlike any they had ever seen. It was sleek, black, and moved with a liquid grace. It was an IG series assassin droid, but heavily modified, its Chaz. Cis covered in advanced sensor arrays and weapon emplacements. In its hand, it held a sniper rifle aimed directly at Lyra's head. An IG-100 Magnaguard, modified for syndicate assassination, Ahsoka breathed, igniting her sabers. They're incredibly fast and programmed with Jedi combat forms. Before anyone could react, the droid fired. Time seemed to slow down. Naruto saw the red blaster bolt leave the barrel. He saw Lyra's eyes widen in terror, her body frozen. He saw Ahsoka start to move, but she wouldn't be fast enough. He didn't think. He acted. He unleashed a fraction of the dragon's flow. He didn't just move fast. He bent space around him, appearing in front of Lyra in the space between one heartbeat and the next. He threw out his hand, not to block the bolt, but to catch it. A miniature, swirling vortex of golden energy, a Rasengan no bigger than his palm, appeared in his hand. The blaster bolt struck it and was not deflected, but absorbed, its energy consumed and dissipated by the perfect rotation of chakra. The assassin droid's optical sensors widened, an almost comical expression of mechanical surprise. Impossible. Energy displacement reading is off the scale. Unidentified ability. Naruto let the Rasengan fade, the golden light in his eyes flaring to life. He looked at the droid, and for the first time, Alara saw the true being behind the casual facade. This was not just a skilled fighter. This was something ancient, something powerful, something that defied every law of physics she had ever known. He took a step towards the droid, his voice dropping to a low W growl that seemed to vibrate in the very air. "You're in my way." Lyra Vex, the ghost of 1313, who trusted no one and believed in nothing but data and currency, could only stare, her brilliant mind completely blank for the first time in her life. She had just seen a man catch lightning in his hand. Her world of predictable code and logical systems had just been shattered by an impossible, beautiful, terrifying truth. And her only thought was, "What in the stars are you?" Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Ghost and the Machine. Naruto's words, a low growl that was more a statement of fact than a threat, hung in the electrically charged air. "You're in my way." The IG-100 assassin droid, a marvel of lethal engineering, processed the statement. Its photoreceptor, a single point of cold, red light, cycled its focus from Alara's frozen form to Naruto. Its internal chronometer registered the 0.003 seconds it took for the blonde humanoid to move from a stationary position to intercept a blaster bolt traveling at near light speed. The energy absorption was a physical impossibility. This being was not in its extensive combat database. He was a statistical anomaly of catastrophic proportions. Priority reassessment. Its internal synthesizer vocalized in a flat, metallic monotone. Primary target. Lyra Vex. Lethality probability. 99.8%. Secondary threat. Jedi Padawan Ahsoka Tano. Lethality probability. 47.3%. Unknown variable. Designation. Naruto. Lethality probability. Unquantifiable. Conclusion. Unknown variable as primary threat. Revising mission parameters. Eliminate the anomaly. The droid moved. It didn't charge. It flowed. Its durasteel frame, immune to the Jedi mind tricks that would have confounded a living being, was a blur of motion. It fired its sniper rifle not at Naruto, but at a massive capacitor bank high above his head. The resulting explosion sent a shower of molten metal and a cascade of raw energy arcing down towards them. It was a classic tactic: separate and conquer by manipulating the environment. Ahsoka, her Jedi training screaming at the danger, leapt back, pulling a stunned Alara with her behind the relative safety of the main console. "Naruto, look out!" Naruto didn't look up. He stomped his foot on the durasteel floor, and a wave of pure, golden chakra erupted outwards, forming a dome-like shield above him. The molten shrapnel sizzled and vaporized against the barrier, and the electrical discharge was harmlessly grounded. The assassin droid was already moving, using the explosion as cover, its form a black silhouette against the flashes of light. It dropped the rifle, and a long, crackling electrostaff telescoped from its arm. It spun the staff with blinding speed, the weapon's hum a deadly counterpoint to the buzzing of the failing power station as it closed the distance. "Your abilities defy known physics," the droid stated, its voice devoid of emotion as it lunged, the tip of its staff aimed at Naruto's heart. "They must be analyzed." Naruto met the attack with a fluid grace that seemed to mock the droid's programmed precision. He didn't block, he redirected. His hand, glowing faintly, brushed against the staff, altering its trajectory by a single crucial degree. The lethal energy tip passed harmlessly by his side, searing a black scorch mark on the floor. He flowed inside the droid's reach, his other hand aimed not at the chassis, but at its primary optical sensor. The IG-100 was faster. It spun, its metallic body a centrifuge of violence, the staff swinging in a wide, decapitating arc. Naruto dropped to the floor, sweeping his leg out. The droid, possessing no sense of balance to disrupt, simply retracted one of its legs and let the sweep pass under it before bringing its other foot down in a bone-shattering stomp. Naruto rolled away, the floor cracking where he had just been. He sprang to his feet, a wide, predatory grin on his face. This was a dance. A beautiful, deadly dance. You're good, he complimented the machine. You learn fast. Learning is irrelevant, the droid retorted. I calculate, I adapt, I terminate. From behind the console, Ahsoka watched, her mind racing. The droid was using a modified version of the Sorzu lightsaber form, a defensive style, but with the aggressive reach and continuous attack pattern of an electrostaff, it became a nigh impenetrable wall of energy. Naruto was holding his own through sheer speed and unpredictability, but he wasn't landing a single solid blow. I need an opening, she yelled, and vaulted over the console, her twin green sabers a vibrant slash of color in the gloom. She engaged the droid from its flank, her reverse grip allowing for a rapid, whirling offense. The air filled with the sharp, percussive crackle of her lightsabers striking the droid's frick alloy staff. The droid was magnificent. It fought both of them at once, its torso spinning independently of its legs, one arm with its staff engaging Ahsoka's furious assault will. Its other hand drew a heavy blaster pistol and fired precise, calculated shots at Naruto. It was a perfect fighting machine, its every move a calculation designed for maximum efficiency. Naruto weaves between the blaster bolts, the red energy beams seeming to bend around him. He created a dozen shadow clones. They didn't attack. Instead, they scattered throughout the massive chamber, leaping onto catwalks, hiding behind transformers, creating dozens of potential targets. The droid's head swiveled, its single red eye processing the new variables. Tactical deception. Logical, but ineffective. It fired a grenade from a concealed launcher in its shoulder. The grenade wasn't an explosive, it was an EMP. A wave of blue energy pulsed through the room. Naruto's clones, being constructs of pure chakra, were unaffected. But the lights in the station flickered and died, plunging them into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the humming green of Ahsoka's sabers and the malevolent red of the droid's eye. Behind the console, Lyra Vex finally rebooted her own mind. The terror and awe receded, replaced by the cold, sharp fury of a professional whose workspace had been invaded. This thing, this machine, was an affront to her. It was a blunt instrument of code, and she was a master conductor of the digital orchestra. You want to play in the dark, you bucket of bolts. She muttered, her fingers flying across her console, which was running on its own internal power source. This is my world. She wasn't trying to hack the droid. Its systems would be a fortress. Instead, she hacked the station itself. Even in its failing state, the power grid was hers to command. She found the controls for the magnetic clamps used to secure heavy equipment. High above the battle, a massive, multi-ton transformer, held in place by magnetic locks, suddenly went dead. With a deafening groan of tortured metal, it began to fall. Ahsoka, move, Naruto yelled, his senses screaming at the new danger. Ahsoka disengaged, leaping backwards just as the colossal piece of machinery crashed to the floor where she and the droid had been fighting. The impact shook the entire station, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. The IG-100 emerged from the dust, its chassis dented but its systems still operational. Environmental attack detected. Source: Slicer Lyra Vex. RE prioritizing primary target. It turned, ignoring Naruto and Ahsoka, and began to advance on the console, its blaster pistol raised. Oh, you did not just do that, Lyra said, her voice a low growl of offense. She Ted a massive surge of energy from a backup generator. A thick power cable, as wide as a man's torso, snaked across the floor. As the droid stepped over it, Lyra flooded it with 1,000,000,000 volts. The cable convulsed, and a miniature lightning storm erupted, engulfing the droid in a cage of pure, white-hot electricity. Any lesser machine would have been turned to slag. The IG-100 staggered, smoke pouring from its joints. Its photoreceptor flickering, but it kept coming. Its frick alloy skeleton was designed to withstand incredible energy damage. It raised its blaster, but before it could fire, Naruto was there. He appeared in a flash of gold, landing on the droid's back, his hands slamming down on its shoulder joints. He wasn't trying to break them. He was channeling the dragon's flow, not as a destructive force, but as a disruptive one, pouring his chaotic energy directly into the droid's sophisticated circuitry. The droid convulsed. Unknown energy intrusion. System corruption in progress. Purging, failure. Its limbs began to move erratically, its targeting systems going haywire. It fired its blaster wildly, the bolts ricocheting off the ceiling. Its motor functions are shorting out. Ahsoka yelled. Seeing the opportunity, she lunged forward, her sabers a green blur, and with two precise, powerful strikes, severed the droid's weapon-bearing arms at the elbows. The blaster and the electrostaff clattered to the floor. Disarmed but not defeated, the droid initiated a new protocol. Its chest cavity hissed open, revealing a glowing red vortex. A self-destruct sequence. A thermal detonator powerful enough to vaporize the entire relay station. Mission failure is unacceptable, the droid monotoned, its voice distorted by the energy corruption. All assets will be liquidated. Alara's eyes widened in horror. We have to get out of here. That thing will take out the whole level. There was no time to run. The detonator's whine was rising in pitch, the red light growing brighter. Ahsoka, pin it, Naruto yelled, leaping off the droid's back. Alara, give me everything you've got. All the power. Channel it to the main conduit right under its feet. Ahsoka didn't hesitate. She used the force, not to lift the droid, but to slam it down, pressing it against the floor with immense gravitational force. The droid struggled, its damaged legs scraping against the metal, but she held it firm. Her face a mask of intense concentration. Alara's fingers became a blur. You're insane. The feedback will fry every system in a 5-block radius. Just do it. With a final keystroke, Alara diverted the station's entire remaining power supply. The floor plates around the pinned droid began to glow cherry red. The main power conduit beneath it hummed like a dying star. Naruto landed in front of the droid. His hands pressed together in a familiar seal. Shadow clone jutsu. 10 perfect copies of him appeared in a circle around the struggling machine. They all began to cycle through hand seals. But it was the real Naruto who drew the eye. He held out his hand, and the raw, untamed electrical energy arcing through the room, the power Alara had unleashed, seemed to be drawn to him. It swirled around his arm, a chaotic sleeve of contained lightning. The dragon's flow was not just his own energy, it was his ability to command the energy of the world around him. He molded the lightning, combining it with his own chakra, forming a crackling, blindingly bright sphere of power in his hand. It wasn't the contained, grinding power of the Rasengan. This was a wild, untamed storm. Kirin, he roared, thrusting his hand forward. It wasn't a physical strike. He unleashed the storm, a colossal bolt of golden lightning, shaped like the mythical dragon of his world's legends, descended from his hand. It didn't strike the droid, it struck the superheated conduit beneath it. The result was an ascension. The entire combined energy of the power station, focused by Naruto's will, erupted upwards in a single, concentrated pillar of pure, white energy. It engulfed the assassin droid, which didn't even have time to register its own destruction. The thermal detonator in its chest was vaporized an instant before it could detonate. The energy pillar shot upwards, punching a perfectly circular hole through the roof of the station and continuing up into the dark recesses of level 1313 before dissipating with a sound like rolling thunder. Then, silence. Absolute, deafening silence. The only light came from the fires burning on the ruptured conduits and the glowing hole in the ceiling. The shadow clones vanished. Naruto stood with his arm outstretched, his chest heaving, steam rising from his skin. Ahsoka released her force hold, stumbling back, her energy spent. Alara stared, her mouth agape, at the spot where the droid had been. All that remained was a molten crater on the floor. Okay, Alara breathed, her voice trembling slightly. New rule. Nobody tries to kill me when you two are around. It's just not fair to them. Naruto grinned, a tired but triumphant expression. They started it. An hour later, the station was filled with the hiss of automated fire suppression systems. They had retreated to Alara's makeshift command center, which was now running on a single, flickering battery. Alara was not at her console. She was kneeling by the severed head of the assassin droid, which had been thrown clear by the blast, a jury-rigged data spike plugged into its cranial access port. This thing was a work of art, she said, a note of professional respect in her voice. Custom built from the ground up. Black Sun must have wanted you dead. Something fierce, Ghost. I have a habit of acquiring data that people don't want acquired, Alara replied distractedly. Her eyes glued to the scrolling text on her datapad. But this This is different. What did you find? Ahsoka asked, cleaning her lightsabers with a quiet, focused intensity. Fragments. Most of its memory core was wiped by the energy surge. But I got its mission directive. Terminate the slicer known as Ghost. She has gained access to encrypted financial records pertaining to PR. Eject Chimera via the Athelred Industries Shell Corporation. Naruto, who had been quietly meditating to regain his energy, opened his eyes. Project Chimera. Never heard of it, Alara said, shaking her head. But it connects everything. Black Sun wants me dead because I accidentally touched the financial records for this project. The records were routed through Athelred Industries. And LRED is the same shell company Lyra Vex used to buy her biostasis pod. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture that was vast and terrifying. A mysterious project, a high-level bounty hunter, a top-tier crime syndicate, and a corrupt bioweapon were all connected through a single financial entity. So Lyra's client, the one who hired her to get the Felucian parasite data, is Probab. Lee, the same person behind Project Chimera, Ahsoka concluded. And Black Sun is their muscle. It's bigger than that, Alara said, her violet eyes wide with a dawning, horrifying understanding. She brought up a complex financial chart. A web of lines connecting shell corporations. Athelred isn't just a company. It's a node, a central hub for hundreds of clandestine transactions. I'm tracking CK flow from Black Sun's payment for the assassin droid, and it's not coming from a syndicate account. The credits are being laundered through the intergalactic banking clan. The name Drive, opt into the silence of the room with the weight of a collapsing star. The banking clan was a neutral entity in the Clone Wars, financing both the Republic and the Separatists. They were untouchable, their financial fortresses the most secure locations in the galaxy. If our mystery client can use the banking clan to launder money and hide their tracks, Ahsoka said slowly, their influence react. He's the highest levels of galactic power. Naruto stood up, stretching. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a steely resolve. So we have our next destination. We go to the bank. Alara let out a short, hysterical laugh. You can't just go to the bank. Their central archives are on Cypio. It's a fortress, physically and digitally. Their encryption is quantum-based. No one can slice it. You said no one has seen your face. That you're a ghost, Naruto reminded her, his cerulean eyes locking onto her violet ones. And I can catch lightning. Ahsoka can move mountains with her mind. Impossible. Is just a word for things we haven't done yet. Alara looked from Naruto's unshakable confidence to Ahsoka's determined nod. Her entire life had been spent in the shadows, trusting no one, relying on nothing but her own intellect. She was a lone operator. But as she looked at these two impossible beings who had saved her life, she felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation. It wasn't trust, not yet. But it was close. It was the feeling of being part of something bigger, something that could actually make a difference, not just for credits, but because it was the right thing to do. She had spent her life running and hiding. For the first time, she felt an urge to run towards the danger. She took a deep breath, and a slow, genuine smile spread across her face, transforming her sharp features into something striking. Okay, Dragon Child, you've got yourself a slicer. But if we're going to rob the most secure bank in the galaxy, we're going to need a plan. And a much, much bigger ship. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Serpent's Kiss. The aftermath of the battle was a study in contrasts. The relay station, a cathedral of industry, was a ruin of twisted metal and shattered conduits, groaning under the weight of its own destruction. The air, thick with the acrid stench of fried circuits and ozone, tasted like a dead machine. In the center of the chaos, three figures stood, bound by the strange, violent alchemy of shared survival. Ahsoka Tano, ever the Jedi, was a beacon of calm focus, her movements deliberate as she tended to a burn on her forearm, her connection to the Force a quiet anchor in the storm of their reality. Naruto Uzumaki, the storm itself, was eerily still, his eyes closed in meditation, drawing the scattered remnants of his power back into himself, the golden light that had poured from him now a soft, internal glow. And then there was Alara Vex. She was a hummingbird trapped in a hurricane, her mind, a precision instrument accustomed to the clean logic of data, now buzzing with the impossible variables she had just witnessed. She paced back and forth in front of her flickering console, her violet eyes darting from the molten crater where the assassin droid used to be. To the impossible man who had unmade it. He had caught lightning. He had commanded a storm. He had bent the laws of physics over his knee and shattered them. Her carefully constructed universe of code, logic, and predictable outcomes had been irrevocably compromised by the walking, breathing paradox that was Naruto Uzumaki. "Okay," she said, the word a gunshot in the oppressive silence. She stopped pacing and stabbed a finger first at Naruto, then at Ahsoka. "New ground rules for our burgeoning, and likely short-lived, partnership. 1. No more summoning mythological creatures made of pure energy inside confined spaces. My hardware can't take the electromagnetic feedback." She gestured wildly at the ruined station. "Exhibit A. 2. We need to get off this level, off this planet. And out from under the thumb of every major power player you've managed to infuriate in the last 48 standard hours. 3. You," she pointed squarely at Naruto, "are going to have to explain, in small, manageable words that my data-driven brain can process, what the hell you are." Naruto opened his eyes, the last vestiges of the Kirin's golden power receding from his irises, leaving them a deep, calm cerulean. He offered a weary but genuine smile. 1. It was a dragon, not a mythological creature. And I'll try to keep it outdoors next time. 2. I agree. 3. It's complicated. I'm a slicer who just reverse-engineered the memory core of a Black Ops assassin droid while simultaneously preventing a multi-level power grid from collapsing into a singularity, Alara retorted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Try me." Quote. Before Naruto could formulate an answer, Ahsoka straightened up, her head cocked, her expression suddenly tense. "We don't have time for a debriefing. We have company. A lot of it." She extended her senses, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Black Sun reinforcements. They're sealing the sector. And something else. Official signatures. Coruscant security force." Alara swore, a string of creative curses in a dialect Naruto didn't recognize but whose sentiment was universal. "Static must have triggered a dead man's switch when I purged him. It would Avenue broadcast my location to his employers. The local security is just a bonus." She was already back at her console, her fingers a blur. "They'll have lockdowns on every transit station and spaceport on the lower levels within minutes. We're trapped." "Trapped is a state of mind," Naruto said, his demeanor shifting from weary warrior to focused leader. The exhaustion fell away, replaced by the sharp, analytical calm he'd learned in 100 impossible battles. "They're looking for 3 people causing a scene. So we stop causing a scene." He looked around the ruined station. "We need to vanish." "Vanish where?" Ahsoka asked, her hand moving to the hilt of her lightsaber. "They'll be sweeping floor by floor." "Not if they're looking in the wrong place," Alara said, a spark of inspiration cutting through her panic. A schematic of the Undercity's labyrinthine systems appeared on her screen. "The station is a ruin, but the mainframe's emergency power is still active. I can create a ghost signal. A false energy trail that matches your unique biosignature," she nodded at Naruto. "I'll make it look like you blasted your way down into the sublevels, towards the planetary core. It'll be a big, flashy diversion. It'll draw their attention, buy us time. And while they're chasing our ghost," Naruto prompted. Alara's lips twisted into a wry smile. "We go up, all the way up, to the surface." It was a plan born of audacious insanity, but it was the only kind of plan that had a chance. While Alara worked her magic, her fingers dancing a symphony of code across her holographic interface, Naruto and Ahsoka prepared for the second phase. They stripped off any identifiable gear, hiding their lightsabers and Naruto's few remaining ninja tools in a hidden compartment within a maintenance droid they'd disabled. They were no longer a Jedi and a shinobi. They were just 2 more faces in the endless, anonymous river of beings that flowed through Coruscant. "Ghost is in the machine," Alara announced, pushing back from her console. "I've created a cascading power surge that'll lead them on a merry chase for at least a few hours. But once they realize it's a decoy, they'll double their efforts. This is our only window." She wiped her console's memory core with a magnetic pulse, then slung a small, battered pack over her shoulder. "Let's move. We have a cargo freighter to catch." Their escape was not a mad dash. but a study in controlled infiltration. They moved through maintenance tunnels and forgotten service conduits, Lyra guiding them with schematics only she could access. Ahsoka using the Force to sense the patrol patterns of the security forces, and Naruto's shinobi instincts keeping them hidden in shadows that seemed to bend around their presence. They emerged into the controlled chaos of the lower-level commercial districts, a world away from the lawless squalor of 1313. Here, the grime was polished, and the desperation was hidden behind a veneer of commerce. They boarded a massive, multi-level cargo hauler destined for the surface spaceport, hiding themselves in a container filled with pungent spices from the planet Ithor. The journey upwards was a slow, rattling, claustrophobic ordeal. Crammed together in the darkness, the sharp, peppery scent of the spices filling their nostrils, the artificial barriers between them began to crumble. So, Lyra's voice was a disembodied whisper in the dark, a dragon made of lightning. That's not a standard Force ability, is it, Jedi? Ahsoka was silent for a moment. The Jedi Code forbade explaining the intricacies of the Force to outsiders. But the rules that had governed her entire life felt very far away, packed in a crate of pungent herbs. No, it's not the Force, not as we know it. I can feel it when he uses it. It's like the Force, but wilder, like an ocean instead of a river. Naruto calls it the Dragon's Flow. Dragon's Flow. Lyra repeated the words, tasting them. An energy source that can be weaponized into focused lightning. Create solid duplicates of its user, and absorb blaster fire. From a purely scientific standpoint, it's the most fascinating thing I've ever encountered. From a street, UCK in a box with the guy who wields it, standpoint, it's terrifying. It's only terrifying if you don't trust the person wielding it, Ahsoka countered softly. Trust is a commodity I can't afford, Lyra shot back, her voice hard. It gets you captured, or killed. I rely on data, and the data on him is incomplete. There was a rustle of movement, and she directed her next question to the other shadow in the crate. You never answered my question. What are you? Naruto sighed, the sound loud in the confined space. He thought of his world, of Konoha, of the long, bloody history of shinobi and tailed beasts. How could he explain it? In my world, we have an energy inside us. We call it chakra. It's the combination of our spiritual and physical energies. We can mold it, shape it, use it to perform techniques. Jutsu. What you saw was a jutsu. And the Dragon's Flow. Lyra pressed. That's different. It's an inheritance. My bloodline. It allows me to not just use my own chakra, but connect with and command the natural energy of the world around me. The planet, the atmosphere, life itself. It's all connected, all flowing. I can just tap into it. You command nature, Lyra stated, her voice flat with disbelief. You're a god. No, Naruto's voice was sharp, cutting through her hyperbole. I'm not a god. I've fought a god. I'm just a man who's learned to listen to a bigger song than most people can hear. And it's not about command. It's about harmony. The Kirin wasn't me creating lightning. It was me asking the storm that was already in the room to strike where I pointed. There's a difference. His explanation, steeped in a strange, elemental philosophy, silenced Lyra. It was a concept so alien to her world of circuits and code that she couldn't process it logically. But she could feel the truth in his words, the simple, unshakable conviction. Ahsoka, however, understood it on a different level. Harmony, balance. It was the core of the Jedi philosophy, but Naruto spoke of it not as a dogma to be studied, but as a living, breathing reality he could touch. It was the Force, unbound by the narrow definitions of Jedi and Sith. The freighter finally shuddered to a halt. The hiss of depressurization and the distant clang of docking clamps told them they had arrived. When the container doors finally opened, they were bathed in the cool, artificial light of a surface-level loading bay. The air was clean, the floors were polished, and the beings moving about were droids and uniformed workers, a world of sterile order. They had made it, but their journey was far from over. Okay, Lyra said, pulling up a datapad as they slipped away from the loading docks and into the public concourse of the sprawling spaceport. We're out of the fire, but we're still in the frying pan. We have no ship, no money, and our faces are probably on a black sun, kill on sight, list that's being distributed as we speak. Our options are limited. We could request assistance from the Jedi Council, Ahsoka suggested, though her tone lacked conviction, and get put into protective custody, while they investigate the matter. Naruto countered, shaking his head. We'd be benched. The trail to Project Chimera would go cold. No, we do this ourselves. With what? Lyra challenged. We can't exactly charter a starship. We'd have to file a flight plan, go through customs. We'd be arrested before we even cleared the atmosphere. So we don't take a ship that needs a flight plan, Naruto said, his eyes scanning the massive viewport that looked out onto the docking rings. Hundreds of ships were moored there, from sleek Republic cruisers to bulky corporate freighters. We take a ship that's meant to be invisible. Lyra's eyes widened as she understood his meaning. You want to steal a ship. I prefer the term tactical acquisition, Naruto corrected with a grin. Ahsoka looked troubled. Naruto, we can't just steal someone's property. It's not the Jedi way. Is letting a secret organization that builds planet-killing weapons and has infiltrated the highest levels of the galaxy continue their work the Jedi way? He retorted, his grin fading. Sometimes, to protect the peace, you have to break a few rules. Isn't that what your old master was famous for? Ahsoka flinched at the mention of Anakin. The comparison was apt, and it made her uncomfortable. But he was right. The stakes were too high for rigid adherence to a code that seemed increasingly ill-equipped to deal with the galaxy's darkness. Even if we could, Lyra interjected, playing devil's advocate while her mind raced with the possibilities. What ship? We'd need something with top-tier stealth capabilities, military-grade shields, a powerful hyperdrive, and a sophisticated comm suite that I can use to slice into the banking clan's network. A ship like that would be one of a kind, and guarded like a king's ransom. Exactly, Naruto said, so we don't look for a type of ship. We look for a specific one. He turned to Lyra. You said Lyra Vex's ship, the Serpent's Kiss, was a custom job, right? You tracked her purchases. Lyra's fingers were already flying across her datapad. Yes, custom sensor scramblers from Arakid Industries, a black market military stealth generator, specialized engine components. Her ship is a ghost. A predator. Find it, Naruto commanded. A pred. Eder has to return to its lair eventually. She's a professional. She'll have a hidden dock somewhere, a place to refuel and rearm away from prying eyes. Your data must have a hint. A transaction for docking fees. A purchase of a specific type of fuel only available in one place. Lyra's eyes lit up with the thrill of the chase. This was a puzzle, a data trail, a ghost in the machine. This was her art. Give me a minute. The minute stretched into 10. They huddled in a small, out-of-the-way alcove, watching the crowds hurry past, while Lyra's consciousness seemed to dive deep into the galactic holonet. Finally, she looked up. A triumphant, savage smirk on her face. Got her. She's good. She uses a dozen shell corporations to pay her bills. But one of them made a recent payment for long-term storage and maintenance to a private hangar in the Coruscant orbital drydocks. Hangar 73. It's a dead-end rental, registered to a company that doesn't exist. That's her. Hangar 73 was in a remote, automated section of the orbital shipyards, a place serviced by droids and rarely visited by living beings. Gaining access was surprisingly easy. A combination of Ahsoka using a mind trick on a bored human supervisor miles away, Lyra slicing the hangar's primitive security system, and Naruto using his chakra to stick to the ceiling and bypass optical sensors got them to the main door without raising a single alarm. The hangar was dark and silent when they entered. Then, with a hum, the lights came on, revealing the ship. It was breathtaking. The Serpent's Kiss was not a brute. It was a stiletto. Its design was sleek and angular, its hull plates a mosaic of matte black and midnight blue, materials designed to absorb sensor scans rather than reflect them. It was larger than a standard fighter, with a predatory, almost organic look to it, like a deep-sea predator. It was a ship built for one purpose: to hunt, unseen and unheard. She has impeccable taste, Lyra breathed, her eyes wide with a technician's admiration. Look at the lines. The external heat baffles are integrated directly into the wings. The weapon emplacements are retractable. This thing could sit in the middle of a Republic fleet, and they wouldn't see it unless they physically bumped into it. They boarded the ship. The ramp hissed open with a quiet efficiency. The interior was as impressive as the exterior. It was stark, functional, and immaculately clean. The cockpit was a single pilot's design, a throne of black leather surrounded by a dizzying array of holographic displays. There were cramped but well-appointed living quarters, a small but state-of-the-art medbay, and a surprisingly spacious cargo hold. Alara went straight for the cockpit, her hands hovering over the controls with a reverence usually reserved for ancient artifacts. The avionics are a custom hybrid of military and civilian tech. The Navi computer is firewalled 6 ways from Sunday. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. She plugged her datapad into the ship's main console. I can bypass the ignition security, but it'll take time. It's a living system, it learns and adapts. I have to teach it a new master. While Alara worked, Ahsoka and Naruto explored the rest of the ship. It was a vessel that told a story about its owner. Everything was practical, efficient, and lethal. The armory was stocked with a variety of weapons, from sniper rifles to thermal detonators. But it was the small personal touches that were most revealing. In the living quarters, on a small table, was a single, exquisitely carved wooden flute from an unknown world. A touch of artistry amidst the deadly function. In the medbay, the supplies were not just for patching up blaster wounds, but included sophisticated antitoxins and genetic sequencers. Lyra Vex was not just a mercenary, she was a survivor, a professional, and a woman of hidden depths. "We're doing the right thing, aren't we?" Ahsoka asked quietly, her voice echoing slightly in the cargo hold. Her moral compass was spinning. They were thieves, about to steal the property of a woman who, while an enemy, had also technically helped them on Felucia. Naruto leaned against a bulkhead, his arms crossed. Project Chimera, a weapon made from my energy that could eat a planet. A secret group powerful enough to use the banking clan and Black Sun as their puppets. Whatever the right thing is, stopping them has to be at the top of the list. This ship, he gestured around them, is just a tool. We're borrowing it for a good cause. I hope you're right, she sighed. Ignition sequence bypassed. Alara's triumphant voice crackled over the ship's internal comm. I've also erased the hangar rental logs and looped the external security sensors. As far as the station is concerned, this hangar is empty and has been for a month. We're free to go. Someone who knows how to fly want to take the con. Naruto and Ahsoka made their way to the cockpit. Naruto slid into the pilot's seat. The controls felt intuitive, natural. The ship seemed to hum in response to his touch, the dragon's flow within him resonating with the powerful energy core of the vessel. "All right," he said, his hands moving confidently over the holographic controls. "Let's see what the serpent can do." With a low, powerful thrum that was felt more than heard, the serpent's kiss lifted off the hangar floor. The landing gear retracted with a quiet hiss. Naruto guided the ship out of the hangar, the massive space doors sliding open at Alara's command. They slipped into the ordered traffic of the orbital lanes. Just another ship among thousands. Engaging stealth generator, Alara announced from the co-pilot station, where she was monitoring the ship's systems. "We are now a ghost." On the main screen, the ships around them continued on their paths, oblivious to the predator that had just joined their ranks. Naruto pushed the throttle forward, and the serpent's kiss accelerated with a breathtaking surge of power. Leaving the orbital station and the planet of Coruscant behind, they were free. They had a ship, a lead, and a mission. For the first time since he had arrived in this galaxy, Naruto felt a sense of control. Of purpose. He wasn't a guest, or a prisoner, or a specimen. He was a hunter. Ahsoka stood behind him, her hand resting on the back of his chair, a silent gesture of support. Alara was a whirlwind of activity, already probing the ship's systems, learning its secrets. They were an impossible team in an impossible ship on an impossible mission. And it felt right. "So," Naruto said, his eyes on the star-dusted blackness of space ahead. "Where to next?" "Cypio." "Not yet," Alara answered, not looking up from her console. Stealing this ship was loud, even if no one heard it. Vex will know it's gone the second her accounts are pinged for the missing hangar fees. She's smart. She'll be able to track us, at least in the beginning. We need a place to lie low, to plan. To upgrade my gear for the bank job. A place where ghosts can disappear. She brought up a set of coordinates on the Navi computer, a location in a notoriously lawless sector of the Outer Rim. "There's a place. A hollowed-out asteroid known as the Shard. It's a smuggler's den, an information broker's paradise, a black market for everything the rest of the galaxy doesn't want you to have. It's neutral ground. No republic. No separatists. The only law is discretion and credits. It's the perfect place for us to become ghosts. Naruto grinned. The shard it is. He inputted the coordinates, and the star lines on the screen elongated, preparing for the jump to hyperspace. But just as he was about to engage the drive, a proximity alert blared. A single, encrypted message request popped up on the main screen. It was a direct, ship-to-ship hail, from a source that was supposedly leagues away. Alara's blood ran cold. That's impossible. No one could have tracked us this fast. Our stealth system is flawless. Unless they weren't tracking us, Ahsoka said slowly, her eyes wide. Unless they were waiting for us. Naruto's hand hovered over the control to reject the call, but a strange instinct. A whisper in the dragon's flow stayed his hand. He accepted the transmission, the holographic projector word to life. And there, standing in the middle of their newly acquired cockpit, was the holographic image of Lyra Vex. She wasn't in her armor. She was dressed in a simple, practical flight suit, leaning casually against a bulkhead, a smirk playing on her lips. She held a datapad in her hand. I have to admit, her smoky contralto filled the cockpit, laced with an infuriating amusement. I'm impressed. I left a dozen tripwires and backdoors in that ship's security system. You didn't just bypass them. You erased them. My compliments to your slicer. She gave a nod to a stunned Alara. How? Was all Alara could manage to say. There's a tracking beacon on the ship, Lyra said simply, as if explaining the weather. A quantum-entangled transmitter. It's woven into the hull at a molecular level. It doesn't send out a signal, so it can't be detected. It just is. I always know where my property is. Her golden eyes then settled on Naruto, her gaze intense, analytical, and intrigued. The real question isn't how I found you. It's why I let you take my ship in the first place. She tapped her datapad. You're after Project Chimera. So am I. My former client, the one who hired me for the Felucia job, is the one running it. Turns out he has a nasty habit of trying to terminate his contractors once they've delivered the goods. A bad business model, so I've decided to terminate my contract with him. Violently, she leaned forward, her holographic image seeming to stare directly into Naruto's soul. You have the power. Your Jedi friend has the moral compass. Your slicer has the brains. You have all the pieces to bring down an empire. What you lack is a guide. Someone who knows the players. Someone who knows the dirty little secrets of the galactic underworld. She smiled, a slow, predatory curving of her lips that was both a promise and a threat. You didn't steal my ship, Dragon Child. I just gave you a test drive. Now, how would you like to hire its pilot? Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Devil's Gambit. The silence in the cockpit of the Serpent's Kiss was a physical entity. A pressurized void that seemed to suck the very air from their lungs. 3 pairs of eyes were locked on the holographic form of Lyra Vex, her infuriatingly calm smirk a testament to her complete control of the situation. She hadn't just predicted their move, she had orchestrated it. The entire theft, the exhilarating escape, had been nothing more than a carefully managed job interview, and they had just passed. Alara Vosh, for the first time in her life, was utterly speechless. Her mind, a fortress of logic and data, had been breached, not by a superior code, but by a level of human audacity she couldn't compute. She felt a grudging, terrifying respect for the bounty hunter. Ahsoka Tano's hand rested on the hilt of her lightsaber, her knuckles white. Her Jedi training screamed that this was a trap. Lyra Vex was a creature of the underworld, a mercenary whose only allegiance was to the highest bidder. To trust her was to invite a vibroblade into one's back. And yet, there was a cold, hard logic to her proposal. They were flying blind into the heart of a conspiracy that had already proven its reach and lethality. Lyra was their only map. Naruto Uzumaki, seated in the pilot's chair, simply watched the hologram, his expression unreadable. The dragon's flow within him was calm, a placid lake. It did not scream danger at Lyra's presence. It simply acknowledged her as a significant force. A predator whose path had now intersected with his own. He was the one who had to make the call. He was the de facto leader of this fractured, impossible crew. You're enjoying this, Naruto said finally. his voice cutting through the tension. It wasn't an accusation, just an observation. Lyra's smirk widened into a genuine, if predatory, smile. Immensely. It's not every day you get to poach a walking, talking superweapon, a renegade Jedi, and the best slicer in the Outer Rim in one fell swoop. My former client is going to be apoplectic. It's wonderful. What's your price? Alara bit out, finding her voice. Her tone was sharp, a shield of professionalism against the violation she felt. Information like yours doesn't come free. And I doubt you've suddenly developed a conscience. My conscience is, as ever, perfectly clear and outrageously expensive, Lyra replied smoothly. My price is threefold. First, a full, equal share of any monetary or material assets we acquire from our mutual enemy. I know for a fact Project Chimera is funded by a slush fund that would make a Hutt blush. I intend to see it liquidated. Into my account. She held up a second finger. Second, I want the complete, unredacted data on Project Chimera. All of it. The science, the personnel, the objectives. Knowledge is power, and my client took a great deal of power from me when he tried to have me killed. I intend to take it back, with interest. And third, Ahsoka asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Lyra's golden eyes shifted, her expression turning serious for the first time. The playful amusement vanished, replaced by a cold, hard focus that was far more intimidating. Third, I want the head of the project. The man who signed my death warrant. I want him delivered to me, alive. My quarrel is with him. Personally, what I do with him is my business. You don't get a say. You don't get to veto. That is the price of my expertise. The final condition hung in the air, a drop of poison. For Ahsoka, it was an impossible demand. The Jedi were not executioners. They did not deal in personal vengeance. To agree to such a term was to cross a line she had sworn her life to uphold. Absolutely not, Ahsoka stated, her voice ringing with conviction. We are not your personal assassination squad. We will bring this man to justice, through the laws of the Republic. Lyra let out a short, harsh laugh. The Republic. The same Republic whose banking clan is laundering his money. The same Republic whose security forces were hunting your slicer on behalf of a crime syndicate. Your justice is a fantasy, Jedi. Out here, in the real galaxy, there is only survival. He tried to take mine from me. I will take everything from him. That is the deal. Take it or leave it. She looked at Naruto. Your call, dragon child. Do you want the Jedi's high-minded ideals, which will get you all killed and leave this conspiracy in place? Or do you want my bloody, pragmatic, and highly effective results? This was the test, the true test. Lyra was forcing him to choose, to define the very nature of their mission. Was this a righteous crusade, or a vengeful war? Naruto leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his cerulean eyes boring into the hologram. We're not your assassins, Vex. We won't be. But, we're not Jedi, either. He glanced back at Ahsoka, his gaze softening for a moment, and in spoken apology. The laws of the Republic failed to protect my home. They failed to stop this project before it began. They are failing to win this war. We can't count on them. We count on us. He turned back to Lyra. Here's my counter offer. We work together. We share all assets, all information. We bring down Project Chimera and everyone associated with it. When we find the man at the top, we will capture him. We will defeat him. And once he is beaten, powerless, and at our mercy, I will leave him in a room with you for 1 hour. What happens in that hour is between you and your conscience. Ahsoka looked horrified. Naruto, it's a compromise. Naruto cut her off, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. It's a line, but it's a line we're not crossing. We won't kill a helpless opponent. But we won't be his saviors, either. He made an enemy of her. He will face the consequences. That's the deal. A long silence stretched. Lyra studied Naruto, her head tilted, a slow, deep appraisal in her golden eyes. She saw the steel in his spine, the unshakable resolve. He had not bent to her will, nor had he foolishly clung to an untenable morality. He had found a third path, a gray path, pragmatic and yet bound by its own strange, fierce code of honor. He had proven he was a leader, not just a weapon. Finally, she nodded, a single, sharp dip of her chin. 1 hour. I can do a lot in an hour. A new data packet was transmitted to their Navi computer. The coordinates for my private safe house on the shard. I'll meet you there. Don't be late. The hologram flickered and died, leaving them once again in a silence thick with unspoken conflict. Naruto, how could you? Ahsoka's voice was a pained whisper. We can't just hand someone over to be tortured or killed. That's what the Sith do. Is it? He asked, turning in his chair to face her fully. His gaze was not angry, but filled with a deep, weary understanding. The Sith torture and kill for power, for pleasure. Lyra is seeking retribution. It's not the same. It's not right, but it's not the same. Ahsoka, look at us. We're a team of outcasts in a stolen ship, hunted by criminals and governments alike, fighting a shadow war. The rules of the temple don't apply out here. We have to make our own. And my first rule is this: we survive. And we win. If that means making a deal with a devil to hunt a monster, then that's what we do. His words, brutal in their honesty, struck Ahsoka harder than any physical blow. She saw the logic, the grim necessity of it. But her heart, conditioned by years of Jedi teachings, rebelled. She looked away, her expression troubled, her spirit at war with itself. Alara, who had been watching the exchange with a detached, analytical curiosity, finally spoke up. He's right, you know. Both Ahsoka and Naruto looked at her. From a purely tactical standpoint, Lyra Vex is a high-value asset with a 97% mission success rate. Her desire for personal vengeance is not a liability, it's a guarantee. It ensures her loyalty to the objective. The Devil's Gambit is the most logical move on the board. Her cold, data-driven assessment offered no comfort, but it forced the brutal reality of their situation. Naruto sighed and turned back to the controls. Set a course for the shard, Alara. We have an appointment to keep. He engaged the hyperdrive, and the STA-RS outside the viewport stretched into long, ethereal lines of blue and white. They were now a crew, bound not by friendship or loyalty, but by a shared enemy and a deeply compromised pact. They were a weapon aimed at the heart of the galaxy's darkest secrets, and they had just made a deal with a devil to guide their hand. The shard was not so much a place as it was a wound in the fabric of space. It was a colossal asteroid, miles long, that had been fractured in some ancient cataclysm, leaving a deep, crystalline canyon running through its core. Within that canyon, a civilization of smugglers, pirates, information brokers, and exiles had taken root, building a vertical city that defied both gravity and law. As the serpent's kiss dropped out of hyperspace and approached under full stealth, the sight was breathtaking. There was no central star. The city was illuminated by the glow of its own reactors, the flashing lights of docking bays, and the colossal, shimmering crystals that lined the canyon walls, refracting the light into a perpetual, ghostly twilight. Ships of every size and description swarmed around it like insects, from tiny, one-man courier vessels to massive, repurpose freighters that now served as mobile marketplaces. The asteroid was a chaotic, self-contained universe, operating on its own rules. Welcome to the Mos Eisley of your nightmares, Alara muttered, her eyes scanning the dense sensor data pouring into her console. The entire asteroid is covered by a privately owned sensor grid. They don't care who you are, but they insist on knowing you're here. Standard procedure is to drop stealth, transmit your ship's ID, and pay a docking fee. And if we don't, Naruto asked, then the network of automated defense turrets built into the asteroid's surface will turn us into a very small, very radioactive cloud, Alara said dryly. Lyra's safe house will have a cloaked docking frequency, Ahsoka reasoned, her tactical mind taking over. One that bypasses the public grid. Already found it, Alara confirmed, her fingers flying. Transmitting her access codes now. It's routing us to a private landing pad, deep in the lower sectors. Section GAMMA7. The grave, according to local slang. Naruto skillfully navigated the ship through the chaotic swarm of traffic, the serpent's kiss moving with a liquid grace that belied its size. He found the designated coordinates. A dark patch of rock on the underside of a massive, protruding spire of the city. As they approached, a section of the rock face shimmered and dissolved, revealing a hidden hangar door that slid open to receive them. He set the ship down with a whisper-soft touch. The hangar was small, clean, and utilitarian, containing only a few stacks of cargo crates and a recharging station. The moment the ramp lowered, the air hit them. It was recycled, with the metallic tang of ozone, but it was also thick with the smells of 1,000 alien species, of exotic cooking spices, and of unidentifiable fuels that powered the station's black market economy. A figure emerged from the shadows at the back of the hangar. It was Lyra Vex, clad now in her midnight blue Mandalorian armor, her helmet tucked under her arm. She was flanked by 2 heavily modified security droids, their red photoreceptors glowing in the dim light. "You're late," she said, her voice flat. "We decided to take the scenic route," Naruto retorted, leading his crew down the ramp. Lyra's eyes swept over them, a quick, efficient appraisal. She gave a slight nod. "Good. You look like you belong. Like you've our 80 had the worst day of your life and you're ready for another one. That's the baseline attitude for survival on the Shard." She gestured for them to follow. "My workshop is this way. It's secure. We can talk there." Her workshop was less a home and more a fortress. Hidden behind a series of armored doors and biometric scanners, it was a large, 2-level space carved directly into the asteroid rock. The lower level was a combination armory, vehicle bay, and high-tech workshop, filled with disassembled weapons, ship parts, and diagnostic equipment. The upper level was a Spartan living area and a state-of-the-art intelligence hub. A semicircular desk with a dozen holographic displays currently showing sensor readings, galactic news feeds, and complex financial data. "Make yourselves at home," Lyra said, without a trace of genuine hospitality. She went to the intelligence hub and brought up a star chart. "Now that we're all friends, let's get down to business. Cypio." She magnified the image of a serene-looking, cloud-swirled planet, the headquarters of the intergalactic banking clan. It's a fortress, not just the planetary defenses, which are formidable, but the digital ones. The IR data vaults are protected by quantum-level encryption, cooled to near absolute zero. You can't slice it from the outside. You have to be physically jacked into their central mainframe. Alara, who had been cautiously examining a custom-built sniper rifle on a workbench, was drawn over by the challenge. Even with a physical connection, breaking quantum encryption is a theoretical impossibility. You'd need a processor the size of a Star Destroyer and 1,000 years to crack a single data file. "Which is why you're not going to break it," Lyra said. "You're going to bypass it." The man in charge of Project Chimera, my former client, is a paranoid recluse. His name is San Hill, the chairman of the banking clan. Ahsoka gasped. "San Hill. He's one of the founding members of the Separatist Council. We always knew he was corrupt. But this, he's playing both sides," Lyra confirmed with a cynical smirk. "He finances the war for the Separatists while his organization holds the Republic's debt. He profits no matter who wins. Project Chimera is his private venture. His endgame. A way to ensure his own supremacy after the Republic and the Separatists have bled each other dry." She pointed to a specific structure on the holographic planet. "San Hill is arrogant. He keeps a private, hardline connection to the Chimera data files in his personal office in the main vault tower. He believes his personal encryption is superior to the bank's. She looked at Alara, are going to prove him wrong. I have the schematics for the tower. We get you to his office, you plug in, you steal the data." It was a classic heist plan. Audacious, dangerous, and almost certainly doomed to fail. Just walk into the most secure bank in the galaxy and get into the office of the chairman. "What's your plan for that? Do we ask nicely?" Alara asked, her sarcasm a finely honed weapon. "That's the problem," Lyra admitted, her expression grim. "The tower is biometrically sealed from top to bottom. Even with the schematics, there's no way to get you inside without raising every alarm in the system." She crossed her arms, her golden eyes narrowed in thought. "We need a new variable. A way in that no one would ever expect. We need an invitation." As they debated the impossible logistics of the heist, Naruto found his attention drifting. He could feel a strange pull, a subtle resonance in the drag on's flow that had nothing to do with the conversation. It was a faint, melodic hum, like a distant song on the edge of hearing. It was coming from outside the workshop, from the chaotic heart of the Shard itself. He walked to the workshop's small, armored viewport, which looked out over a dizzying panorama of the crystalline canyon city. The pull was stronger here. It was a thread of energy, serene and ancient. A stark contrast to the desperate, chaotic energy of the station's inhabitants. "I need to go out," he said suddenly, turning away from the window. The three women stopped talking and looked at him. "Go out where?" Lyra demanded. "We're in the planning phase of the most important intelligence coup in galactic history, and you want to go sightseeing." "It's not sightseeing," Naruto said, his gaze distant. "There's something here. Something. Or someone. I can feel it. It's connected to me. To the dragon's flow." Ahsoka frowned, extending her own senses through the Force. "I don't feel anything. Just the usual background noise of a place like this." "It's not in the Force," he tried to explain. "It's underneath it. Another layer." Lyra studied him, her analytical gaze missing nothing. She had seen him perform miracles. She was pragmatic enough to know that ignoring his instincts would be foolish. "Fine. But you're not going alone." She looked at Ahsoka. "Jedi. You're with him. Try to keep him from starting an interstellar incident." She then pointed at Alara. "Slicer. You're with me. We're going to the black market. You need a custom-built interface if you're going to have a prayer of cracking Sand Hill's personal rig. And I need to stock up on explosives. A lot of explosives." The markets of the Shard were a sensory assault. A massive, multi-leveled bazaar built into a vast cavern, filled with beings from 1,000 worlds. The air was a thick soup of smells. Sizzling street food, alien perfumes, and the ever-present tang of ozone and hot metal. The noise was a deafening roar of haggling. Of barkers hawking their wares, of the hiss and clang of workshops, and of dozens of different musical styles clashing in a dissonant symphony. Naruto and Ahsoka moved through the crowd, their simple travelers' clothes allowing them to blend in. Ahsoka was on high alert, her hand never far from her hidden lightsaber, her senses cataloging the dozens of potential threats in the crowd. But Naruto was calm, his focus turned inward, following the invisible thread of energy. It led them away from the main bazaar, down a series of winding, narrow corridors to a quieter section of the station. This area was different. The raucous energy of the market was replaced by a hushed reverence. The shops here didn't sell weapons or ship parts. They sold artifacts, ancient texts, and strange, esoteric items. This was the Mystic's Quarter. The thread led him to a small, unassuming shop tucked away at the end of a dark alley. There was no sign, only a single, carved wooden door with a symbol etched into it. A serpent eating its own tail, but with the head of a dragon. An Ouroboros, a symbol of eternity and rebirth. "This is the place," Naruto murmured. He pushed the door open. A small bell chimed, a clear, melodic sound that seemed to cut through all the station's background noise. The interior of the shop was dark, lit only by the soft glow of a few floating candles. The air smelled of old parchment, dried herbs, and something else, something ancient and clean, like the air after a thunderstorm. The walls were lined with shelves, but they weren't filled with merchandise. They were filled with star charts, but not of the galaxy they knew. These were charts of energy flows, of ley lines, of cosmic convergences. A figure sat behind a simple wooden counter at the back of the shop, seemingly asleep. It was an old woman, her species impossible to determine. Her skin was the color of polished mahogany, and her face was a beautiful, serene mask of wrinkles. Long, silver hair was braided with what looked like threads of starlight. She was wrapped in a simple, gray robe. As they approached, her eyes opened. They were a startling, luminous silver, and they seemed to see not just Naruto and Ahsoka, but the very fabric of their souls, their pasts, their potential futures. "You took your time, last dragon," she said, her voice a soft, melodious whisper that seemed to echo in their minds rather than their ears. "I have been waiting for you." Naruto and Ahsoka exchanged a shocked glance. "You know who I am?" Naruto asked, taking a step closer. "I know what you are," the old woman corrected gently. "You are an echo of the first song. A child of the celestial architects. The balance point between the untamed chaos of the flow and the rigid order of the Force." She gestured to a stool in front of her counter. "Sit. We have much to discuss." Naruto sat, his mind reeling. Ahsoka stood protectively behind him, her suspicion warring with a sense of profound awe. The old woman radiated a power unlike anything she had ever felt. It was not the light side or the dark side. It was Ancient, eternal. My name is Riel, the seer said, her silver eyes never leaving Naruto. I am a keeper of the old ways. One of the few left who can read the currents of the great river, the energy you call the dragon's flow. How is that possible? Naruto asked. My bloodline. I thought I was the last. Your bloodline is unique, for it carries the fire of the architects themselves, Riel explained. But the ability to sense the flow is not limited to your kind. It is a gift, rare and often misunderstood. The Jedi touch it, but they are afraid of its depths, so they skim the surface and call it the living force. The Sith try to dam it and bend it to their will. But they only ever touch its most violent eddies and call it the dark side. They are all children, dipping their hands in an ocean and thinking they understand the tides. She leaned forward, her expression growing serious. Your arrival in this galaxy was not an accident, last dragon. It was a fulfillment, a prophecy whispered when the stars were young. When the galaxy is torn asunder by its own children. When the light fades and the shadow grows long, the dragon will be reborn from a world of impossible strife. He will be the unifier. The one who will teach the children to hear the first song once more. A prophecy, a destiny. It was the last thing Naruto wanted. He had spent his entire life shackled to a prophecy, fighting and bleeding for a destiny that had been laid out for him before he was even born. He had finally thought he was free, and now, a galaxy away, he was being handed another one. I'm not anyone's savior, he said, his voice hard. I'm just trying to find my way home. Are you? Riel asked, her silver eyes seeming to see right through his denial. Or are you trying to find a reason to stop fighting? A reason to rest? The dragon does not rest, child. It burns. Your path does not lead home. It leads to the heart of the coming storm. She held up a hand, and a small, smooth, white stone materialized from thin air. It pulsed with a soft, internal light. You came here seeking a way into the fortress of a greedy man. You seek to steal his secrets. But you are asking the wrong questions. She placed the stone on the counter. It slid across the wood and stopped in front of Naruto. The secrets you need are not on Cypio, she whispered, her voice filled with a grave importance. Project Chimera is not the disease. It is merely a symptom. The true poison lies elsewhere. The man you hunt, San Hill, he did not create the weapon on Felucia. He merely funded its rediscovery. The knowledge came from somewhere else. From something ancient, something that was locked away. She pointed a long, wrinkled finger at Naruto. Your path will lead you to Cypio. You will face the banker and his greed. But the data you find there will not point you to a man. It will point you to a place. A prison. A world of eternal ice, lost in the unknown regions. It is called Malachor. The name sent a shiver down Ahsoka's spine. It was a name whispered in the darkest corners of the Jedi archives. A place of ancient horror, a graveyard of both Jedi and Sith. When you have the location, Riel continued, her voice dropping to a near inaudible whisper, bring this stone to the heart of the prison. It will show you the truth. It will show you what has been sleeping. What your arrival has begun to awaken. With that, her eyes closed, and she seemed to fall back into a deep slumber. The light fading from her silver irises. The audience was over. Naruto stared at the stone in his hand. It was warm to the touch, and it hummed with the same serene, ancient energy as the seer. He had come looking for a whisper and had been answered with a thunderclap of prophecy. His small, personal war against a secret project had just been reframed as a battle for the soul of the galaxy, against an ancient, sleeping evil. He and Ahsoka left the shop in a stunned silence. The raucous noise of the market seemed distant, muted. The weight of Riel's words was a physical burden. When they rendezvoused with Lyra and Alara back at the workshop, the mood was starkly different. Alara was practically vibrating with excitement, holding up a sleek, black device studded with crystalline ports. A quantum cascade processor, she announced, her eyes shining. Military grade, black market, and utterly illegal. With this, I won't just bypass San Hill's encryption, I'll own his entire digital existence. Lyra, for her part, was calmly loading a series of small, cylindrical charges into a carrier. High-yield plasma charges, enough to breach a vault door or a ship's hull. Our shopping trip was a success. She looked at Naruto and Ahsoka. You two look like you've seen a ghost. Naruto opened his hand and showed them the stone. Worse, he said, his voice grim. "We saw a map." He explained what Riel had told them. About the prophecy, about Malachor, about Project Chimera being a symptom of a greater darkness. When he finished, the four of them stood in silence, the scale of their mission having expanded to a terrifying, cosmic degree. It was Lyra, the hardened pragmatist, who broke the silence. A sleeping evil, a cosmic prophecy, a lost world of eternal ice. She picked up one of her plasma charges, weighing it in her hand. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. "Good. I was worried this was going to be too easy." She looked around at the faces of their impossible crew. The Jedi struggling with her faith, the Slicer who trusted only machines, and the Dragon Child burdened by a destiny he didn't want. "It doesn't change a thing. One step at a time. The mission is the same. We go to Cypio. We rob the bank. We get the data, and we follow the poison to its source." Her confidence was a rallying cry, a point of certainty in a sea of cosmic dread. Naruto looked at the stone in his hand, then at his new allies. His path didn't lead home. It led to the heart of the storm. And for the first time, he realized he wasn't walking it alone. "All right," he said, closing his fist around the stone, its warmth a small comfort against the coming cold. "Let's go rob a bank." Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Scipio Gambit. The planet Scipio floated in the blackness of space like a flawless pearl. From the viewport of the Serpent's Kiss, it was an image of serene, cold perfection, its surface a swirling masterpiece of white clouds and shimmering ice caps. Utterly devoid of the chaotic greens and browns of a living world. It was a planet of pure, sterile order, the architectural embodiment of the intergalactic banking clan itself. The entire world was a vault. Planetary shields are at full strength, Alara announced from the co-pilot station, her voice a tight, professional monotone that betrayed the frantic thrum of energy just beneath her skin. "They're scanning all incoming traffic with quantum-level detail. Our stealth generator is holding, but it's like trying to hide a shadow in a room flooded with light. The slightest flicker, the smallest energy spike, and they'll be on us. They won't be looking for a ghost." Lyra Vex's voice crackled from the comm station in her workshop on the Shard. She was their eye in the sky, their mission control, plugged into the schematics and public sensor grids she had acquired over years of illicit dealings. "They'll be looking for a ship with a registered flight plan. Which is what you're about to give them." In the center of the cockpit, Naruto, Ahsoka, and Alara stood around a holographic projector displaying Lyra's avatar. She was clad in a simple black flight suit, a stark contrast to her formidable armor. But her presence was no less commanding. "You're going to approach the primary customs ring openly," Lyra instructed, her tone leaving no room for debate. "You are representatives of Athelred Industries, a recently capitalized holding firm from the Outer Rim, here to discuss opening a high-volume credit account with Chairman San Hill's office directly. The Moons respect two things, wealth and audacity. You will present them with both. And they'll just let us in?" Ahsoka asked, her skepticism plain. "Just like that. Athelred Industries is the shell corporation San Hill himself uses for Project Chimera." Alara interjected, a flicker of appreciation for Lyra's cunning in her eyes. "He's been funneling billions of untraceable credits through it. On any public ledger, it looks like one of the wealthiest new corporations in the galaxy. We're using his own weapon against him." "Exactly," Lyra confirmed. "They'll scan your credentials, which Alara has masterfully forged to be impeccable. They'll see the numbers and their greedy little hearts will flutter. They won't be able to resist the opportunity to get their hands on that much new capital." She then addressed each of them in turn. "Alara, you are the firm's chief financial officer. You talk numbers, and only numbers. Ahsoka, you are her diplomatic aide. You smile, you nod, you look non-threatening. Naruto," her golden eyes seemed to bore into him even through the hologram, "you are their personal security. You say nothing. You do nothing. You just stand there and look like you are capable of turning anyone who insults your employers into a fine red mist. It's called psychological deterrence. Try to enjoy it." Naruto cracked a grin. "I think I can handle that." The plan was a razor's edge. It relied on Moon Avarice, Alara's forgeries, and their own ability to project an aura of untouchable power and wealth. One wrong word, one flicker of doubt in their performance, and the entire planet's defenses would descend upon them. As Naruto guided the serpent's kiss out of the cover of a nearby moon and into the designated approach vector, Alara disabled the stealth generator. The ship's signature blared into existence, and instantly, they were painted by a dozen different targeting systems. Unidentified vessel, a cold, synthesized voice echoed through the cockpit. You have entered a restricted zone. Identify yourself or you will be fired upon. Alara's fingers danced across her console, transmitting their false credentials. This is the corporate vessel Golden Mean, Registry Oryx 77. Representing Athelred Industries. We have a priority appointment request for Chairman San Hill. There was a long, tense pause as the faceless security system of the banking clan dissected their data packet. The silence stretched, each second a lifetime. Naruto could feel the ship being scanned on a molecular level, its power core analyzed, its life support signatures counted. Your credentials are significant. The voice returned, a subtle shift in its synthesized tone that almost sounded like respect. Proceed to docking bay ALPHA-3. A reception party will meet you. A collective sigh of relief went through the cockpit. The first lock had been picked. Docking Bay Alpha 3 was a cavernous, sterile white space, eerily silent save for the low hum of atmospheric regulators. The IR was cold and smelled of ozone and antiseptic cleansers. Waiting for them as the ramp lowered was a delegation of tall, gaunt moons in severe, high-collared gray uniforms, flanked by a squad of IG Lancer combat droids. Their polished chrome bodies gleaming under the harsh lights. The performance began. Alara descended the ramp with an air of bored impatience, as if being met by a mere security detail was an insult to her station. Ahsoka followed a step behind, a serene, pleasant smile on her face, the perfect picture of a deferential aide. Naruto came last. He wore a simple, dark, high-collar, ed tunic that hinted at a uniform without belonging to any known faction. He moved with a coiled, predatory stillness, his hands clasped behind his back, his cerulean eyes sweeping over the droids and the moons with a flat, emotionless gaze that promised swift and total violence. The lead moon, a being whose elongated face was a mask of professional condescension, stepped forward. On behalf of the intergalactic banking clan, I am Administrator Tolik. We were not aware of your appointment. The chairman will be, Alara stated coolly, not breaking her stride. Our arrival is the appointment. We have a portfolio of 3 trillion credits we wish to relocate. If your establishment is not equipped to handle such a transaction, I am certain the corporate alliance will be more accommodating. He mention of a rival faction and the sheer, astronomical number had the desired effect. Tolik's composure cracked for a fraction of a second, a flicker of naked greed in his dark eyes before the professional mask slammed back into place. Of course, our institution is more than capable. This way, the chairman's office is in the primary spire. They were led through a series of silent, white corridors, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty spaces. The entire facility was automated, sterile, and deeply unsettling. There were no decorations, no art, only the cold, hard geometry of wealth and power. They're moving into the central transit nexus, Lyra's voice whispered in their ears through hidden comm units. According to the schematic, you need to divert to Service Corridor Beta 7 to bypass the main security checkpoint for the executive levels. As they approached a major intersection, Ahsoka subtly stumbled, a graceful, practiced fall that looked entirely accidental. As she went down, she used the Force to send a targeted pulse of energy into a nearby lighting conduit. The lights in the corridor flickered and died for a single second, plunging them into darkness. In that 1 second of blackness, the team moved. Lyra had timed it perfectly with the patrol cycle of the internal sensors. Naruto, moving with impossible speed, pulled Alara and Ahsoka into the unmarked doorway of the service corridor. When the lights came back on a moment later, Administrator Tolik and his droids turned to find their guests had vanished. An alarm, soft and discreet at first, then rising in urgency, began to chime. They bought the diversion, Alara whispered, her heart pounding. But we're on the clock now. The entire tower will be in lockdown in minutes. The service corridors were a different world. Dark, cramped, and filled with a labyrinth of pipes and humming power conduits. Lyra's voice was their guide, a calm, steady presence in their ears. Left at the next junction. Climb the vertical access ladder for 3 levels. The vent you want is on the north wall, behind a coolant regulator. Ahsoka went first, her agility allowing her to scale the ladder with silent speed. Lyra followed, burdened by her gear, but determined. Naruto came last, his senses extended, listening for any sign of pursuit. The infiltration was a masterclass in teamwork. Ahsoka used the fork to muffle the sound of their movements and to gently nudge the minds of the few maintenance workers they encountered, making them forget they had seen anything. Lyra, with a handheld device, interfaced with security panels, creating micro-loops in the surveillance feeds and momentarily disabling pressure plates. Naruto was their silent guardian, his physical prowess a safety net, ready to eliminate any threat before it could raise an alarm. They finally reached the executive level, emerging from a ventilation shaft into a silent, opulent lounge outside the chairman's office. The carpets were thick, the air was scented, and the walls were made of a polished, obsidian-like stone. The door to Sandhill's office was a massive slab of bronzium, etched with the symbol of the banking clan. "This is it," Lyra breathed, pulling the quantum cascade processor from her pack. "The door is sealed with a genetic scanner and a quantum state lock. There's no way through." "We're not going through it," Lyra's voice came over the comm. "Look up." Directly above the door was a large, decorative grate, part of the room's ornate ventilation system. It was the one structural weakness Lyra had found in the schematics. Naruto crouched, and Ahsoka, understanding his intent, leapt onto his clasped hands. He launched her upwards with a surge of controlled strength, sending her soaring towards the ceiling. She ignited one of her lightsabers in midair, the green blade humming to life, and sliced through the grate's locks with surgical precision before landing as softly as a whisper. They climbed roughed the shaft and dropped down into their target. Sandhill's office was a monument to ego. It was a vast, circular room, the outer wall a single, massive window offering a breathtaking view of Scipio's icy plains. The center of the room was dominated by a huge, circular desk made of some dark, lustrous wood, but the desk itself was empty. Instead, a holographic interface shimmered above it. "Where is he?" Ahsoka whispered. "He's not here," a new voice said, a voice that was calm, cultured, and dripping with condescending amusement. "But I have been expecting you." The holographic interface on the desk flickered, and the face of Sandhill appeared, 10 feet tall. He was exactly as his intelligence profiles described, impossibly tall and thin, his gaunt moon face a mask of arrogant superiority. But he wasn't looking at them. His holographic eyes were scanning a datapad. Simultaneously, the main door to the office hissed open. Standing there was not the real Sandhill, but a team of 4 menacing figures. They were not droids. They were hulking, reptilian beings, a species Naruto and Ahsoka recognized with a jolt of dread. Trandoshans. But these were different from the thugs in the cantina. They were clad in sophisticated, form-fitting combat armor and carried advanced pulse rifles. And on their shoulders was the insignia of the Black Sun. So, the Ghost, the Renegade Jedi, and the Anomaly. The holographic Sandhill said, his lips curling into a thin, cruel smile. "Lyra Vex sends her regards, I presume. She was always so predictable, sending a new set of pawns to do her dirty work." The Trandoshans raised their rifles. "Alara, now," Naruto commanded. The battle exploded. Ahsoka was a whirlwind of green light, her sabers a blur as she deflected the initial volley of blaster fire. Naruto moved with a speed that seemed to defy inertia, crossing the room in a heartbeat. He didn't attack the Trandoshans directly. He slammed the palm of his hand onto the floor, sending a pulse of pure chakra through the metal. The floor plates buckled and warped, throwing the heavily armored mercenaries off balance. Lyra's voice was a furious hiss in their ears. "It's a trap. His personal guard. Get Lyra to the console." Lyra didn't need telling. While the fight raged, she sprinted to the desk, ignoring the blaster bolts sizzling past her head. She slammed the quantum cascade processor onto the desk's physical interface port, and a torrent of holographic data erupted around her, a 3-dimensional warzone of code and encryption. "I'm in," she yelled over the din of combat. His personal server is firewalled from the main bank network, just like Lyra said. But the encryption is beautiful. It's alive. It's learning. The fight was brutal in close quarters. The Trandoshans were elite hunters, their natural strength augmented by their combat armor. One of them engaged Ahsoka, his rifle butt transforming into a crackling electro bayonet. Their duel was a dance of light and shadow. Lightsaber against crackling energy. Another lunged at Naruto, who met him with a fluid barrage of taijutsu, his strikes precise and debilitating, aimed at the joints and weak points of the armor. The remaining two focused their fire on Lyra. Lyra's voice cut through the chaos. Naruto, protective detail. She is the mission. Naruto disengaged from his opponent with a powerful kick, then blurred across the room. Appearing in front of Lyra's console, he slapped his hands together. Shadow clone jutsu. 4 clones appeared, instantly forming a defensive perimeter around the slicer. Intercepting and deflecting the incoming fire with their bare hands, the chakra-infused skin sizzling but holding. This man is an artist of paranoia, Lyra muttered, her consciousness lost in the digital battlefield. Her avatar, a sleek, silver ghost, darted through fractal landscapes of defensive code, dodging hunter-killer programs shaped like snarling beasts. But he's arrogant. He left a backdoor for himself, a single, vanity-laced administrator command. If I can just find it. The holographic Sand Hill watched the chaos with detached amusement. Impressive, but futile. You cannot comprehend what you are meddling with. Project Chimera is not a weapon, it is the key to evolution. The next step, the power to reshape life itself. A power far beyond the crude understanding of Jedi or your pet monster. Power is a tool, not a goal, Ahsoka grunted, locking blades with her opponent, the feedback from the electro bayonet jarring her arms. And you're not worthy to wield it. Naruto, the real one, finally went on the offensive. He formed a Rasengan in his hand, the swirling sphere of blue energy a stark contrast to the sterile white room. He didn't aim it at a Trandoshan. He slammed it into the wall beside the main door. The wall exploded inwards, the force of the blast sending 2 of the mercenaries flying. The chaos escalated as alarms blared throughout the tower, no longer discreet, but a full-throated scream. Got it, Lyra yelled, her face illuminated by the triumphant glow of her console. The master key, it was his own name. The ego on this guy. She initiated the data transfer. And a colossal river of information began to pour into the Serpent's Kiss, *S remote servers, routed through a dozen ghost networks Lyra had set up. Downloading now. It's massive. Terabytes of data. Your pathetic theft means nothing, Sandhill's hologram sneered. You will not leave this planet alive to use it. His image flickered and then vanished. The last Trandoshan, seeing his comrades defeated, activated a device on its wrist. A high-frequency screech filled the room, and the massive window behind Sandhill's desk began to fracture. He's going to blow the window. Ahsoka shouted. The decompression will kill us all. There was no time to escape. No time to think. Naruto acted. He flashed through a series of hand seals, biting his thumb and slamming his hand on the floor. Summoning jutsu. An enormous cloud of smoke erupted in the center of the room, so dense it momentarily blotted out everything. From within it, a colossal, deep voice boomed, a sound of ancient power and boundless annoyance. What is it now, Naruto? I was in the middle of a very pleasant nap. As the smoke cleared, the remaining Trandoshan, and Ahsoka and Lyra, could only stare in stunned disbelief. Coiled in the center of the office, so large it had to duck its head to avoid the ceiling, was a gigantic, crimson-skinned toad, clad in a blue happy coat and carrying a massive dosu blade strapped to its side. He held a pipe in his mouth and looked thoroughly unimpressed. It was Gamabunta, the chief toad of Mount Myoboku. Bun-ta, Naruto yelled, pointing at the fracturing window. Block it, now, Gamabunta grumbled, but he moved. He was surprisingly fast for his size, positioning his massive, unmovable body in front of the window just as it shattered outwards. The explosive decompression hit him like a physical blow, sucking at him, trying to pull him out into the thin, frozen atmosphere of Cypio. The colossal toad simply braced his legs, his immense bulk filling the breach, the vacuum of space howling around him. Download complete, Lyra screamed, ripping the processor from the console. Let's go, Naruto commanded. He leapt onto Gamabunta's head. Thanks, Chief. I owe you 1. You owe me 1,000. Gamabunta roared back. Now get out of here before these metal men show up with something that can actually scratch me. Ahsoka, grabbing Lyra, used the force to leap onto the toad's broad back. With the breach temporarily sealed, they made their way to the gaping, Resendon-made hole in the wall and sprinted into the now chaotic corridors. Alarms were blaring, and squads of Lancer droids were converging on their position. Their escape was a running battle. Lyra's voice guided them through the mayhem, directing them towards a rendezvous point not at the docking bay, but at a maintenance airlock on the tower's lower levels. They fought with a desperate, synchronized fury, a whirlwind of green lightsabers, shadow clones, and precise blaster fire from a SM. All pistol Alara had surprisingly revealed from her boot. They reached the airlock just as a squad of droids rounded the corner behind them. Lyra's plasma charges, which she had instructed them to plant on their way in, detonated, bringing a section of the corridor ceiling down and blocking their pursuit. They scrambled into the airlock. As the inner door sealed, they could see the serpent's kiss hovering just outside. Its ramp already lowered, piloted remotely by Lyra. They leapt across the gap, and the ramp snapped shut behind them, the ship's engines roaring as it peeled away from the tower, leaving a scene of chaos and destruction in its wake. Naruto pushed the ship to its limits, diving towards the planet's surface to use the terrain as cover, before rocketing back up towards space. A swarm of automated defense fighters in hot pursuit. Engaging stealth, Alara yelled, her hands flying over the console. The ship shimmered and vanished from the fighters' screens, calculating a random jump vector. Ahsoka called out, her Jedi training in astrogation proving invaluable under pressure. Ready in 3, 2, 1, now. Naruto slammed his hand on the hyperspace lever, and the stars outside dissolved into a familiar, beautiful tunnel of blue light. They had done it. They had walked into the heart of the enemy's fortress, faced its master, and stolen its most valuable secret. They were bruised, exhausted, but they had won. In the sudden, quiet calm of hyperspace, Alara brought up the newly acquired data on the main screen. It was a complex, terrifying web of information, genetic research, weapons schematics, financial transactions, and personnel files. But at its heart, at the core of the entire conspiracy, was a single file, locked with a final layer of encryption. Alara's fingers flew, the quantum cascade processor still hot from the effort. The lock broke with a soft chime. The file opened. It was not a schematic or a report. It was a single, ancient star chart. And at its center was a lone, dark planet, marked with a single, chilling word. A name that echoed with the weight of Riel's prophecy. Malachor. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. Echoes in the Void. Hyperspace was a silent, blue-white river. A place outside of time and conflict. Aboard the Serpent's Kiss, however, the echoes of the Cypio gambit were deafening. The adrenaline had long since bled away, leaving in its wake a heavy, vibrating exhaustion and the monumental weight of what they had done. They had robbed the most powerful financial institution in the galaxy, declared war on a shadow conspiracy, and in the process, had perhaps irrevocably changed the course of their own lives. The ship, their sanctuary and their prison, hummed around them, a steady, low thrum that was the only sound in the vast, silent emptiness between the stars. The cockpit was a tableau of contained tension. Naruto sat in the pilot's chair, the controls on autopilot, his gaze fixed on the flowing vortex of hyperspace but seeing something else entirely. He was not merely tired, he was soul-weary. The fight, the flight, the impossible summoning, it had all drawn heavily on his reserves, but it was the weight of command, of the choices he had made, that truly pressed down on him. He had made a deal with the devil and dragged his friends along with him. The silence from the Togruta standing behind him was more damning than any accusation. Ahsoka Tano was not meditating. She was trying to, but the calm center she had been trained her entire life to find was gone, replaced by a turbulent storm of conflicting emotions. The Force, her lifelong guide and comfort, felt distant, obscured by the raw, primal energy of the man in front of her and the morally gray choices he had forced upon her. She had sliced through droids, deflected blaster fire, and stood firm in the face of explosive decompression, but it was the memory of Naruto's quiet, firm words, "It's a compromise," that left her spirit bruised and shaking. At the co-pilot's station, Lyra Vex was a whirlwind of focused energy, a stark contrast to the heavy stillness of the others. The quantum cascade processor was hardwired into her console, and her fingers moved with blinding speed. her violet eyes glowing with the reflected light of a dozen holographic screens. She was not merely looking at the stolen data, she was devouring it. This was her victory, her trophy. She had cracked the uncrackable, humbled the galaxy's most arrogant mind, and was now feasting on the secrets of the gods. Yet even in her triumph, a persistent, illogical variable kept intruding on her thoughts. A giant, talking toad with a knife. The thought was so absurd, so contrary to every known law of physics, that she kept pushing it aside, only for it to resurface with a fresh wave of cognitive dissonance. The comm unit chirped, a sharp, intrusive sound that shattered the fragile quiet. It was Lyra. Her holographic form materialized on the central projector, her face a grim, professional mask. "Report," she said, her voice devoid of pleasantries. "We have the data," Alara answered without looking up from her console. "All of it, currently decrypting the tertiary layers. It's a mess of shell corporations, black ops science projects, and a truly obscene amount of embezzled funds. Sand Hill was building an empire. He is building an empire," Lyra corrected, her tone sharp. "And you just stole his crown jewels. I've been monitoring the shadow feeds. The entire Black Sun Syndicate is on high alert. There's a bounty on your heads that would make a Hutt blush. Not just for capture. Disintegration is also an acceptable outcome. Sand Hill isn't just sending hunters, he's declared a private war." The news landed with a thud, another weight added to the already overburdened atmosphere. "We're ghosts," Naruto said, his voice flat. "In your ship, ghosts can be exorcised," Lyra retorted. "Sand Hill has assets beyond droids and thugs. He has specialists. People like me, only with fewer scruples. We're not going directly to Malachor. It's the first place he'd expect. I'm transmitting new coordinates. A dead system in the Atricious sector. We'll rendezvous there, refuel, and comb through this data properly. We need to know exactly what we're walking into before we set foot on that frozen rock." Her image flickered as she looked at each of them in turn. "You did good. You were loud, messy. And you summoned a biological anomaly of unprecedented size into his office, but you got the job done. Now the real work begins. Stay dark. Vex out." The hologram vanished, leaving them once again alone with the consequences of their actions. Ahsoka finally moved, stepping forward until she stood beside Naruto's chair. She didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the flowing stars. "We need to talk," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Naruto swiveled the chair to face her. He didn't speak, just waited, his expression patient. He knew this was coming. "The deal you made with Lyra," Ahsoka began, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "To hand over Sand Hill. That's not justice, Naruto. It's vengeance. It's a path to the dark side." "Is it?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I come from a world where the lines are not so clear, Ahsoka. A world of shinobi. We lived and died in the shadows. We made hard choices to protect the people we cared about. I've seen villages burn, I've seen friends die. All because someone's ideals prevented them from doing what was necessary." He stood up, closing the space between them until he was looking down into her troubled eyes. "Sand Hill is a monster. He created a weapon that consumes life, he's funding a war that's killing billions, and he tried to have our entire team killed. The justice of the Republic is a trial, a prison sentence. And men like him own the prisons. They own the courts. What Lyra wants, it's not pretty. It's not noble, but it is a consequence. An end. An assurance that his evil will not infect the galaxy any longer. We are not Jedi, bound by a code that our enemies laugh at. We are the consequence." His words chipped away at the foundation of her beliefs. She wanted to argue, to quote the teachings of her masters. But the truth of his grim logic was undeniable. The Jedi were losing the war. Their dogmatic approach was failing. Anakin, her own master, bent the rules to the breaking point to get results. Naruto wasn't just bending them, he was forging new ones in the fire of their desperate circumstances. "And the toad?" she asked, shifting the subject, her voice softer now. "What was that? I felt it through the Force. It was alive. Ancient. It wasn't one of your shadow clones." "His name is Gamabunta," Naruto said, a fond, weary smile touching his lips for the first time. "He's the chief of the toads of Mount Myoboku. A friend. It's a summoning contract. A bond made between my clan and his, centuries ago. You summoned a creature, from another place. Another dimension. The concept was staggering. A violation of known galactic physics. From my old world, I guess, he said with a shrug. It's a jutsu that connects space-time. It's complicated. He saw the confusion and awe in her eyes. Look, Ahsoka, where I come from, the world is alive with power. We don't just use the Force. We make pacts with the animal spirits, we command the elements, we can even cheat death itself. The dragon's flow is just one part of it. The part that's in my blood. There is so much more you don't know. His confession was an act of profound trust, an opening of a door to a past he had kept locked away. It was a world of myth and magic far beyond anything the Jedi had ever conceived of. It made her realize how small her understanding of the universe truly was. She didn't have an answer for him. She could only look at this impossible man, who carried entire worlds of power and pain within him, and feel a sense of overwhelming awe, and a deep, frightening connection. Later, in the ship's small galley, Lyra finally cornered him. She had abandoned her console for the first time in hours, and her eyes had the wild, obsessive gleam of a scientist who had just witnessed a miracle and was desperate to dissect it. She pushed a steaming mug of nutrient paste into his hands and blocked the doorway. Okay, she said, foregoing any preamble. The summoning. Let's talk about it. Not the philosophical, spirit animal, nonsense. The physics. You created a localized, stable wormhole and extracted a multi-ton biological entity from what I can only assume is a parallel dimension. The energy expenditure would be astronomical. The temporal mechanics alone should have torn the ship apart. How? Naruto took a sip of the bland, gray paste and grimaced. I told Ahsoka, it's a jutsu, a space-time technique. Don't give me that. Lyra snapped, pacing in the confined space. A technique is just a procedure. What is the mechanism? You use your chakra, this internal bioenergy. Is it a catalyst? Does it excite local quantum foam to create a temporary bridge? Does the summoning scroll act as a targeting computer, locking onto the dimensional frequency of this, Mount Myoboku? I need data, Naruto. My entire understanding of reality has a toad-shaped hole in it, and it's driving me insane. Naruto couldn't help but laugh, a genuine, hearty laugh that echoed in the small room. He had faced down gods and monsters, but he had never been so relentlessly interrogated by a slicer with a physics obsession. I don't know, Lyra. I just do it. I draw the seals, I use my chakra, and I call my friend. It's a bond. It's not a machine. Everything is a machine, she insisted, her frustration palpable. We just don't understand the schematic yet. A bond, a contract, those are just terms for a stable energy transfer protocol. She stopped pacing and stared at him, her violet eyes intense. When you use your dragon's flow, I can track the energy readings. They're chaotic, but they obey certain rules of thermodynamics. But that summoning, there was no energy spike. It was a null event. One moment there was nothing, the next there was a toad. It's a physical impossibility. A true, something from nothing, event. Maybe your machines just don't have the right sensors to measure it, Naruto suggested gently. His simple, almost childishly profound statement stopped her cold. She opened her mouth to argue, to list a dozen different sensor types he couldn't possibly understand, but she stopped. He wasn't being dismissive. He was challenging the very foundation of her belief system. That everything was knowable, measurable, quantifiable. He was the walking, talking embodiment of the data point that breaks the entire algorithm. Fine, she said, letting out a long, frustrated sigh. Fine, be a magical space wizard with your trans-dimensional frog. But when I figure out how to build a scanner that can quantify it, I'm taking a full biopsy. From the frog, she stormed out of the galley, leaving Naruto shaking his head with a smile. The fear and awe were gone, replaced by an aggressive, relentless curiosity. For Lyra, that was her own strange version of acceptance. Hours later, the three of them gathered back in the cockpit. The exhaustion had settled into a grim determination. Lyra, guided by Lyra's remote instructions, had stripped away the layers of deception around the Malachor file. It's a graveyard, she whispered, her usual sarcastic bravado gone, replaced by a tone of genuine dread. The data is heavily corrupted, but I've managed to restore fragments. Logs from ancient Republic survey ships, from early Jedi explorers, from lost prospectors. They all say the same thing. She brought up a text file on the main screen, the characters flickering and unstable. Hyperdrive failure upon entering the system. All navigation sensors are offline. The planet, it feels wrong. The force is silent here. A wound. Another fragment appeared. Life support failing. The ship is being torn apart by gravitational shears that don't appear on any sensor. We're getting whispers over the comms. Voices. Calling from the surface. A final, terrifying fragment materialized. It is not a dead world. It is a hungry one. The scourge of Malachor, the great cataclysm, it didn't end. It's waiting. Do not come here. By the force, turn back. A deep chill settled in the cockpit. Colder than the void outside. Ahsoka stared at the screen, her face pale. The great scourge of Malachor. It was a forbidden lesson in the Jedi archives. An ancient battle between the Jedi and the Sith. Thousands of years ago, it was said a superweapon was activated, one that destroyed both armies and the planet itself. It killed the Force in that entire sector of space. Then Sandhill isn't trying to create a new weapon, Naruto said, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. He's trying to salvage an old one. The Felucian Devourer wasn't his invention. It was a reverse-engineered copy of something far older and more terrible. And the seer, Riel, Ahsoka added, her voice barely a whisper. She said my arrival had started to awaken what was sleeping there. The weight of the prophecy, of his own existence in this galaxy, crashed down on Naruto with renewed force. He was not just a warrior in a small, secret conflict. He was a catalyst. His very presence, the raw, living power of the dragon's flow, was acting like a beacon, a call to some ancient, force-devouring evil that had slept for millennia. He pulled the smooth, white stone Riel had given him from his pocket. It was cold to the touch now, its internal light completely gone. It was as if it, too, could feel the chilling dread of the name Malachor. They sat in silence for a long time, the three of them. A Jedi who had lost her certainty, a slicer who had lost her faith in logic, and a shinobi who had lost his home. They were adrift in an ocean of impossible choices and cosmic horrors. With only each other and their stolen, ghost of a ship to rely on. They were a fractured, dysfunctional, and deeply damaged group of individuals. But as they looked at the terrifying data on the screen, a new, unspoken understanding passed between them. They were all afraid. They were all out of their depth. And they were all in this together. The sound of the ship dropping out of hyperspace was a jarring return to reality. They had arrived in the dead, empty space of the Atricious sector. Waiting for them was a single, tiny light against the endless black. A small, battered freighter, its transponder off, floating silently in the void. That's not Lyra, Alara stated, her hands already flying, scanning the vessel. Her ship is a custom build. This is a standard Corellian light freighter. Old model. A tense, expectant silence filled the cockpit. They were exposed, vulnerable. The comm channel crackled to life, a secure, encrypted hail. It was Lyra's voice, but it was strained, urgent. Change of plans, she said, her voice tight with a tension they had never heard from her before. I'm not coming. I have a tale, a bad one. Sandhill didn't just put a bounty on you. He hired a specialist, an inquisitor from the Black Sun's inner circle. On their screen, a file appeared. It was a single, grainy image of a figure in dark, flowing robes, their face obscured by a shadowy cowl. The only visible feature was the hilt of a unique, double-bladed lightsaber hanging from their belt. A red one. This isn't just a Sith fanatic, Lyra's voice was grim. This is one of their bogeymen. A Jedi hunter. I'm leading them on a chase through the outer rim to buy you time. The freighter ahead of you contains supplies, fuel, and a contact. A woman named Seer Junda. She's a former Jedi Knight. One of the few who survived the early purges. She knows more about ancient Sith lore in places like Malachor than anyone in the archives. Lyra paused, and for the first time, a note of something other than cold professionalism entered her voice. It was a warning, born of hard-won, bloody experience. Be careful, all of you. This game just got bigger than any of us. The hunter that's on my tail, They're not just following me. They're hunting a feeling. They're hunting the echo you left behind, Naruto. They're hunting the dragon. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Scholar in the Shadow. The Atricious sector was a place the galaxy had forgotten. A dead system, where the skeletal remains of long-dead planets orbited a cold, dying star. It was a place of absolute silence, a fitting stage for the tense, quiet drama unfolding in the cockpit of the Serpent's Kiss. The freighter floating before them, old and scarred, was a ghost in a graveyard. There was no grand reception. The fray. Chair's docking tube extended with a weary groan of old machinery and attached to their airlock with a solid, definitive thud. The protocol was clear. Naruto and Ahsoka would go, while Lyra maintained the ship's systems, ready to detach and flee at a moment's notice. The trust between them was still a fragile, new thing, but it was forged in the fires of necessity. The interior of the freighter was as worn as its exterior. The air was heavy with the smell of old ozone, coolant, and the faint, dusty scent of ancient books. It was a scholar's vessel, not a warrior's. In the cramped cargo hold, IDST stacks of data pads and salvaged artifacts, a woman stood waiting. She was not what they expected. Seer Junda was a human woman of middle age, her dark hair streaked with gray and tied back in a practical bun. There were lines of weariness and sorrow etched around her eyes, but those eyes themselves were sharp, intelligent, and missed nothing. She wore the simple, practical clothes of a salvager. But she held herself with an unyielding stillness that hinted at a lifetime of discipline. A heavy blaster pistol was strapped to her thigh, a clear and present statement that her days of relying solely on the Force were long over. Lyra Vex was descriptive, Seer said, her voice a low, steady alto. Her gaze flickered between them, a quick, analytical scan. She noted Ahsoka's posture, the unmistakable bearing of a Jedi Knight, and lingered on Naruto, her brow furrowing as she tried to place the strange, powerful energy that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. She mentioned a Jedi, a warrior of impossible power, and a slicer who could break reality. I see 2 out of 3. Let's hope you're the right 2. I'm Ahsoka Tano, Ahsoka said, offering a respectful, if cautious, nod. This is Naruto Uzumaki. I am Seer Junda, she replied, her guard not lowering an inch. Lyra said you have data from Sand Hill. Data that points to Malachor. Show me. They moved to a small, cluttered briefing room. A single flickering holodable at its center. Alara transmitted the core file, and the ancient, terrifying star chart of Malachor materialized in the center of the room, its single, ominous name casting a pale blue glow on their faces. Seer stared at the map, her expression hardening, the lines around her eyes deepening. She reached out a hand, not to touch the controls, but as if feeling a cold draft emanating from the image itself. So, it's true, she whispered, her voice filled with a dread so profound it seemed to chill the air. He didn't just find the legends. He found the location. We believe he's trying to salvage a weapon there, Ahsoka explained. Something from the old wars. Seer let out a short, humorless laugh. Weapon is too small a word. The Jedi of that era were arrogant. They believed they could create a device to end the war with the Sith in a single stroke. They called it the Mass Shadow Generator. It was designed by a Jedi artisan, a master of gravitational fields. It was meant to be a tool of final, terrible justice. She manipulated the hologram, bringing up archival images, fragmented and corrupted, of a colossal space station orbiting a vibrant, living planet. The station was a weapon, and Malachor was its target. During the final battle, when the Jedi fleet was on the verge of defeat, the generator was activated. It didn't just destroy the ships, Jedi and Sith alike. It created a gravity vortex of such intensity that it crushed the entire planet. It shattered it, broke its spirit. But the real horror was what it did to the Force. Her eyes met Ahsoka's, a shared, terrible understanding passing between the two Jedi. It created a wound, a place where the Force itself died. Every living thing on the planet, in the fleet, in that system, was killed in an instant. Their final, collective scream created an echo, a permanent scar in the fabric of reality. Malachor is not a dead world. It is a tomb, and the ghosts within it are still screaming. The weight of her words settled upon them. This was a horror beyond their comprehension, a tragedy on a cosmic scale. Riel, a seer on the shard, told us the weapon was sleeping, Naruto said, his voice low. That my arrival was waking it up. Seer's sharp gaze snapped to him, a new, dawning horror in her eyes as she finally began to comprehend the nature of the energy she was sensing from him. Your power. It's not the force, is it? It's something else. It's alive. So intensely alive. It's the dragon's flow, he said simply. The flow. Seer breathed the words, her eyes wide with a scholar's awe and a survivor's terror. The ancient texts, the pre-Republic legends, they speak of it. The first song. The raw energy of life itself, from which the force is but a single echo. She took a step back. A hand raised as if to ward him off. You don't understand. The wound of Malachor is a void. An absence. A hunger. Your power. This raw, untamed life energy, bringing it near Malachor would be like holding a lit match to a leaking gas line. You wouldn't just awaken the weapon, you could feed it. You could give that ancient hunger a new, inexhaustible source of power. The echo of death would be given the engine of life itself. The result? It would be an apocalypse. The final piece of the puzzle slammed into place. Naruto was not just a key. He was the ammunition. His very existence was the catalyst for a cataclysm that could potentially unravel the galaxy. The prophecy, the destiny he had so desperately tried to deny, was not about saving the galaxy. It was about his potential to unmake it. The silence that followed was broken by the quiet, insistent beep of the comm. It was Lyra. Naruto. Ahsoka. You need to see this. They returned to the serpent's kiss, a new, heavier dread clinging to them. In the cockpit, Lyra had isolated a specific data fragment from the Malachor file. It wasn't a log or a schematic. It was a single, repeating audio file, heavily corrupted. She had spent the last hour cleaning it. It was buried deep in the core data, she said, her voice unusually subdued. I think it's a recording from the surface. From the weapon itself. She played the file. At first, it was just static, a hiss of dead air. But then, underneath the static, a sound began to emerge. A low, rhythmic thrumming, like a colossal, sleeping heart. And woven within it, a whisper. A chorus of 1,000 voices, all speaking as one, a sound of ancient pain and endless, patient hunger. Soon, the voices whispered, a sound that seemed to crawl under their skin. The star will come. The feast will begin, soon. The recording cut out, leaving them in a stunned, horrified silence. The weapon wasn't just a machine. It was conscious. It was aware. And it was waiting for them. It was in that moment of shared terror that it happened. It was not a sound or a sight. It was a presence. A wave of pure, concentrated malevolence that washed over the ship, a psychic shockwave that felt like a shard of frozen, jagged ice being driven into their minds. Ahsoka cried out, staggering back, her hands flying to her temples. Seer grunted, her knees buckling, her face a mask of agony. The psychic assault was aimed at them, the Force sensitives, a focused, brutal intrusion. They were slammed with visions. The Jedi temple burning, the faces of their fallen masters twisted in silent screams. The weight of their failures, their survivors' guilt, amplified 1,000 times. Naruto felt it too, but differently. For him, it was not a memory, but a violation. The warm, ever-present ocean of the dragon's flow was invaded by a pinpoint of absolute cold, a needle of pure, nihilistic hate that sought to poison the living sea within him. He saw visions of his own power turning against him. A golden Rasengan consuming Ahsoka, a nine-tailed beast of pure energy shattering Konoha into dust, his friends' faces contorted in terror of him. I feel you, anomaly, a voice echoed in their minds. It was not the chorus of ghosts from the recording. This voice was singular, cold, and synthesized with a metallic rasp of utter contempt. A brilliant, arrogant light in an ocean of darkness. You burn so brightly, but all lights cast a shadow. And the shadow is hungry. The psychic pressure intensified, threatening to shatter their minds. Lyra, immune to the mental attack, could only watch in horror as her companions convulsed, their faces pale with sweat. But then, Naruto fought back. He roared, a guttural, defiant sound that was not just vocal, but spiritual. He did. NT tried to block the intrusion with a mental shield. He did what a dragon does. He burned. He unleashed the dragon's flow, not outwards as a weapon, but inwards, as a cleansing fire. A visible aura of soft, Golden light erupted from his body, a miniature sun in the cramped cockpit. The cold, dark presence in their minds shrieked, not in pain, but in surprise and a kind of hungry delight, as it was forcibly ejected by the raw, overwhelming tide of life energy. The pressure vanished as quickly as it had come. Ahsoka and Seer collapsed to their knees, gasping for breath, the terrible visions Reese. Ding but leaving phantom pains in their wake. Alara rushed to Ahsoka's side, helping her up. What was that? Alara demanded, her voice shaking with a rage born of helplessness. The Inquisitor, Seer rasped, pushing herself up. Her face grim. The Jedi hunter Lyra warned us about. They can reach across the stars. They are strong in the dark side. Very strong. They weren't just attacking us, Ahsoka said, her voice trembling slightly as she looked at Naruto, who stood with the golden aura slowly receding around him. They were tasting you, testing your power. The truth was sickeningly clear. Lyra's plan to lie low was useless. They were a beacon. Naruto's very existence was a lighthouse for the darkest things in the galaxy. Running was no longer an option. The hunter knew their scent. Naruto walked to the viewport, staring out at the cold, dead stars of the Atricious sector. The weight on his shoulders felt immense, enough to crush a planet. The prophecy, the weapon, the hunter, it was all centered on him. He was the nexus of a conflict that had been brewing for millennia. He finally understood. Riel had been right. His path did not lead home. It led to the heart of the storm. He turned, and the weariness in his face was gone, replaced by a resolve so hard and so absolute it seemed to change the very light in the room. His cerulean eyes were like chips of ice. Alara, he said, his voice quiet but ringing with an authority none of them had heard from him before. How long would it take Lyra to get to Malachor from her current position? Alara, startled by the question, quickly ran the calculations. If she's running flat out, with the Inquisitor on her tail, 2 days. Maybe 3. And us. From here, we could be there in 12 hours, she answered, her voice hesitant. Good, Naruto said. He looked at Ahsoka, then at Seer, whose shocked expression was slowly turning to one of grim understanding. He was not asking for their permission. He was informing them of a fact. We're not waiting. We're not running. We're ending this. We're going to the source. The fear was still there, a cold knot in the pit of his stomach. But beneath it, something else was burning. An emotion he hadn't truly felt since the end of the war in his own world. A righteous, cleansing fury. These shadows, these ghosts, these hunters, they had threatened his new friends. They had violated his mind. They had made a grave, fatal error. They had made it personal. Set a course for Malachor, he commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. Let's go meet the ghosts. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Dragon and the Tomb. The 12 hours it took to reach Malachor were the longest of their lives. Hyperspace, usually a silent, detached state of travel, felt like a slow, inexorable slide into a waiting abyss. There was no conversation. Words were insufficient for the cold, creeping dread that had taken root in the heart of their small crew. The air in the serpent's kiss was thick with unspoken fears. With the psychic residue of the Inquisitor's assault, and with the chilling whispers from the audio file, a promise of a hunger that had waited for millennia. Ahsoka Tano stood on the flight deck, her back to the others, forcing herself through the calming meditations of her Jedi training. But the Force, her constant companion, was a muted, trembling thing. It was like trying to find a point of stillness in the heart of an earthquake. The closer they got to their destination, the more the Force felt, frayed, like a rope stretched to its breaking point. All she could sense ahead was a void, a black hole in the fabric of the universe that promised nothing but oblivion. Yet, when she reached out, she could feel another presence beside her, a steady, warm, and ferociously defiant light. Naruto. He was not the calm of the Force, he was the fire that held the encroaching darkness at bay. Her own fear was a real and tangible thing, but her faith in him was becoming just as powerful. Lyra Vex, for her part, had retreated into the cold, hard comfort of her data. She ran diagnostic after diagnostic on the ship's systems, reinforcing firewalls, optimizing power flow, treating the vessel not as a machine, but as a suit of armor for the battle to come. The logical, predictable universe she had once inhabited was gone, shattered by trans-dimensional toads and psychic ghosts. All that was left was a single, terrifying axiom: the impossible was now possible, and it was trying to kill them. Her work was a frantic, desperate prayer to the only god she had ever known, the god of the machine. Seer Junda sat in the galley, her eyes closed, a datapad resting untouched in her lap. She was not meditating, she was remembering. She was walking the halls of the lost Jedi archives in her mind, sifting through forbidden texts and fragmented histories of the old Sith Wars. She was a scholar facing the final, terrible examination of her life's work. She had spent decades studying the shadows of the past, and now, she was about to step into the darkest of them all. And Naruto stood at the viewport, his hands pressed against the cold transparent steel, watching the river of blue light. He was the eye of the storm. The fear was a cold serpent coiled in his gut, but he had lived with fear his entire life. He had been a vessel for a creature of pure hate, he had been ostracized, hunted, and had faced down a literal goddess who could unmake reality. This was different. This fear was not for himself, but for the new, fragile family he had found in this lost galaxy. He was the catalyst, the prophecy, the weapon, the hunter, it all revolved around him. His power was the key, the fuel, the prize. For the first time, he felt the true weight of his bloodline, not as a gift, but as a terrible, cosmic burden. He closed his fist around the smooth, cold stone from Riel, its inner light still dormant. It was a promise of a truth he was not sure he was ready to face. The ship dropped out of hyperspace with a sickening lurch, not the clean transition they were used to, but as if it had been violently ripped from the blue tunnel and thrown into the void. The silence that followed was absolute. Before them hung the Malachor system. It was a masterpiece of cosmic horror. There was no sun, only the distant, cold pinpricks of far-off stars. The system was a graveyard. A debris field of shattered moonlets and the skeletal remains of ancient starships, locked in a slow, silent orbit around the planet at its center. And the planet, Malachor, was a sphere of fractured, obsidian black rock, veined with angry red canyons that glowed with a faint, hellish light, as if the world itself were still bleeding from its ancient wounds. A perpetual, sickly twilight clung to its surface, and the entire planet was wreathed in a miasma of dark, swirling clouds. But it was the feeling that was the true horror. The instant they arrived, the ship's lights flickered, and a low, groaning moan echoed through the hull, the sound of stressed metal. Alara's console lit up with a dozen red alerts. Gravitational shears, she breathed, her voice tight with terror. They're everywhere. Unstable, unpredictable. They're not on any star chart. The ship is being pulled in a dozen different directions at once. The mass shadow generator, Seer said, her voice a grim whisper from the doorway. Its effects are still active. The laws of physics are broken here. Ahsoka stumbled, her hand flying to her head. The Force, it's gone. It's just a hole. A screaming, empty hole. Naruto felt it too. The dragon's flow, the living sea of energy that was his birthright, felt sick. It was sluggish, cold, and tinged with a profound, soul-deep agony. It was the energy of a world that had been murdered. Its life force still crying out in a silent, eternal scream. I can fight the gravity, Naruto said, sliding into the pilot's chair, his hands moving with a new, grim purpose. He wasn't flying the ship with its instruments, he was flying it by feel, using his own connection to the world's tortured energy to navigate the invisible currents that were trying to tear them apart. Alara, find us a place to land. Somewhere stable. The descent was a nightmare. The serpent's kiss groaned and shuddered, buffeted by forces that defied measurement. Naruto's knuckles were white on the controls, his face a mask of pure concentration, beads of sweat rolling down his temples. He was in a silent duel with a dead planet. They broke through the cloud cover and the true devastation of Malachor was revealed. The surface was a petrified landscape of jagged rock and black sand. And everywhere, scattered across the plains and frozen on the sides of crumbling ruins, were statues. Thousands of them, the petrified bodies of Jedi and Sith, their forms turned to stone in their final, agonizing moments, their faces masks of terror and rage. It was a battlefield frozen at the moment of its own damnation. There, Seer pointed, her voice trembling. The Sith Temple, at the heart of the plateau. That's where the generator was housed. If there's a core, it will be there. Naruto brow. Tee the ship down in a relatively clear area, a graveyard of ancient, shattered fighters. The moment the engines powered down, the silence of the tomb descended upon them, broken only by the faint, mournful whistle of the thin, freezing wind. They gathered at the ramp, armed and armored. Ahsoka in her familiar combat gear, her twin sabers at her belt. Seer with her blaster and a grim resolve. Lyra, surprisingly, was clad in a light, form-fitting environmental suit, a custom-built data spike on one wrist and a compact plasma pistol in her hand. If I'm going to die in a haunted space temple, she'd stated, I'm not going to be the only one with just a keyboard. Naruto stood before them, his gaze sweeping over his team. We don't know what we're facing in there, he said, his voice a low, street Edie anchor in the oppressive atmosphere. But we face it together. Stay close. Watch each other's backs. And if you hear the whispers, don't listen. They stepped out onto the surface of Malachor, and the world itself seemed to recoil. The ground crunched under their boots, the sound unnaturally loud in the profound silence. The air was thin, cold, and tasted of dust and ancient sorrow. Their journey to the temple was a walk through a gallery of nightmares. They passed legions of the petrified dead, their silent, stone faces a constant, accusing presence. The whispers began almost immediately, not a sound in their ears, but a thought in their minds, a cold, insidious slither of doubt and fear. You abandoned me, Ahsoka heard, the voice a phantom echo of her former master, Anakin. You left me alone in the darkness. She shook her head, her hand tightening on her lightsaber, her breath catching in her throat. You can't protect them, the whispers hissed in Naruto's mind, showing him images of Ahsoka, Lyra. All falling before a tide of darkness. Your power is a curse. You will be their end. He clenched his fists, the warmth of the dragon's flow a defiant spark against the cold. He reached the entrance to the Sith temple, a colossal, triangular maw of black stone that seemed to swallow the dim light. As they stepped across the threshold, the whispers intensified, and a new horror began. The petrified warriors around them, their stone bodies cracking and groaning, began to move. Their eyes, once dead stone, now glowed with a malevolent red light. The ghosts of Malachor had found puppets. The battle was a desperate, chaotic affair. The stone soldiers were slow but incredibly strong and relentless. Ahsoka's lightsabers, which should have carved through them, sizzled and sparked. The petrified bodies strangely resistant to the energy blades. Seer's blaster bolts ricocheted off their stone skin. Naruto became the storm. He created a dozen shadow clones, which threw themselves at the Stone Legion, buying time with their disposable bodies. The real Naruto moved among them, not striking the stone, but the ground beneath it. He slammed his fists into the floor, shattering the rock, creating fissures that swallowed the slow-moving puppets, his raw, physical power the only thing that seemed to have a definitive effect. They fought their way through the crumbling corridors, the ghosts of the past literally trying to drag them down. Finally, they reached the heart of the temple, a vast, cavernous chamber. At the center of the chamber, suspended in a web of crackling, dark energy, was a colossal, black, multifaceted crystal. It was the size of a small starship, and it pulsed with a slow, rhythmic, sickly purple light. It was the heart of the weapon, the source of the whispers, the engine of the eternal echo. And as they entered, the thrumming intensified, a low, hungry sound that vibrated in their very bones. The stone from Riel in Naruto's pocket suddenly blazed with a brilliant white light, its warmth a shield against the oppressive cold of the chamber. The Kyber crystal, Seer breathed in horrified awe. A massive, living crystal, bled by the Sith until it screamed, then amplified by the generator. It's not a machine, it's a soul. A tortured, hungry soul. I can overload the energy regulators, Lyra said, her eyes scanning the conduits that fed the crystal. But the feedback, it will bring the whole temple down on top of us. It's a one-way trip. Before they could formulate a plan, a slow, mocking clap echoed from the shadows on the far side of the chamber. Bravo, a voice said, the sound synthesized, metallic, and dripping with contempt. You've survived the welcome party. I am impressed. A figure stepped out of the darkness. As clad in flowing black robes and a full-face helmet of obsidian metal, its design a cruel, angular mockery of a Jedi temple guards. In its hand, a double-bladed red lightsaber ignited with a menacing snap hiss. The Inquisitor. The presence from the ship, now here, in the flesh. The anomaly, the Inquisitor said, its helmeted head tilting as it focused solely on Naruto. The Emperor has foreseen your arrival. A spark of true, untamed life in a galaxy of pale imitations. He wishes to study you. To understand how your power can be perfected. Harnessed. He sent me to collect you. We're not going anywhere with you. Ahsoka snarled, igniting her own blades, Seer and Alara raising their pistols beside her. The Inquisitor let out a sound that might have been a laugh. The failed Padawan. The forgotten scholar. The data insect. It dismissed them with a wave of its hand. You are irrelevant. It took a step towards Naruto. Join us, Dragon Child. The Jedi and their feeble code are dying. The future belongs to those with the strength to seize it. Your power could reshape the galaxy. Why waste it protecting these broken things? They're my friends, Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet. He took a step forward. The white light from the stone in his hand casting his face in a stark, determined glow. And you made a mistake. You came for us. You hunted us. You threatened us. His cerulean eyes began to glow with a faint, golden light. I'm not going to let you hurt them. The Inquisitor lunged, moving with a speed that was a black blur. The final battle began. Ahsoka and Seer met the Inquisitor's charge. Their twin green sabers and Seer's desperate blaster fire against the whirling, crimson blades of the hunter. It was a fight for their lives, a desperate attempt to buy the time they so desperately needed. Alara, the regulators. Now, Naruto yelled, his command cutting through the chaos. He created a wall of shadow clones to protect her as she sprinted towards a raw panel near the base of the pulsating crystal. But Naruto did not join the fight against the Inquisitor. He turned his back on it, an act of supreme, unbelievable trust in his friends. He walked towards the colossal, screaming crystal. The whispers intensified, a psychic hurricane of pain and hunger, trying to tear his mind apart. You will fail. You will die. Join us. Feed us. He ignored them. He reached the base of the crystal's containment field and held up Riel's stone. He poured his own energy, the warm, vibrant life of the dragon's flow, into the small, white stone. He wasn't fighting the weapon's consciousness. He wasn't trying to destroy it. He was listening. He opened his mind, his soul, to the cacophony of a million dying screams, to the millennia of pain and loneliness. He did not meet their hate with hate. He did not meet their hunger with fear. He met their pain with his own. He showed them his own life, the loneliness of his childhood, the pain of losing his master, the grief of losing his parents. The sacrifices of the war. He showed them the love he had for his friends, the unwavering belief in the bonds that connect people. He didn't offer them power or oblivion. He offered them understanding, empathy. The small, white stone blazed like a star. A wave of pure, white, serene energy pulsed outwards, not of destruction, but of peace. The furious, purple thrumming of the crystal faltered. The psychic screaming in their minds did not stop, but it changed. The rage lessened, the hunger subsided, replaced by a profound, cosmic sigh of release. The ghosts of Malachor, for the first time in millennia, were being heard. Overload sequence initiated. Alara screamed, slamming her fist on a console as sparks flew around her. We have 60 seconds before this whole planet becomes a black hole. The giant crystal began to crack, shedding shards of black, bleeding light. The energy in the room became unstable. The Inquisitor, locked in combat with Ahsoka and Seer, was thrown back by a wave of psychic feedback from the dying weapon, its connection to the dark side faltering in the wave of Naruto's purifying energy. This is not over, anomaly. It shrieked, its voice losing its synthesized calm and becoming filled with rage. The Emperor will have you. It threw a smoke pellet to the ground, and by the time the smoke cleared, it was gone. We have to go, now, Ahsoka yelled, grabbing Seer and pulling her towards the exit. The temple was collapsing around them, the very rock groaning as the heart of Malachor died. They sprinted through the corridors, dodging falling debris. The ghosts of the stone soldiers crumbling to dust around them. They burst out of the temple entrance and ran across the petrified battlefield towards the Serpent's Kiss. Just as they reached the ramp, a new ship dropped out of the sky, its engines screaming. It was Lyra's original freighter, scarred and smoking from a dozen weapons impacts. The side hatch was open, and Lyra Vex stood there in her full armor. A heavy repeating blaster in her hands, laying down covering fire at unseen phantoms in the sky. "Get on your ship and get the hell out of here," she roared over the comm. "I've led the entire Black Sun fleet on a merry chase, but the welcoming party is about to start." They scrambled up the ramp of the Serpent's Kiss, Naruto taking the controls even as the ramp was closing. The ground buckled, a massive fissure splitting the plateau as the temple imploded, dragging the entire landscape down into the planet's core. Naruto pushed the engines to their breaking point, the ship screaming as it clawed its way into the sky. Outside the viewport, a war was raging. A small, desperate fleet of Black Sun cruisers had dropped out of hyperspace and was engaging Lyra's lone freighter. "We can't leave her," Ahsoka cried. "We're not," Naruto said, his face a mask of grim determination. He opened a channel to Lyra Vex. "Get ready for a pickup." He spun the ship, flying not away from the battle, but directly into it. He buzzed the bridge of the lead cruiser, drawing its fire, as Lyra abandoned her freighter, using her jetpack to launch herself across the void. The ramp of the Serpent's Kiss lowered for a heart-stopping 3 seconds, just long enough for her to land in a heap inside, before snapping shut again. "Punch it," Lyra yelled, scrambling into the cockpit. Naruto didn't need to be told. He engaged the hyperdrive, and the horrifying, dying world of Malachor, along with the fleet of their enemies, vanished into the brilliant, peaceful blue of hyperspace. They had survived. They floated in the silent river of light, a crew of 5, bruised, battered, and forever changed. They had faced the ghosts of the past, a hunter from the shadows, and the hungry heart of a dead world. They had not just won. They had brought peace to a place that had known only pain. Ahsoka looked at Naruto, who was slumped in the pilot's chair, the golden light completely gone from his eyes, leaving only a deep, profound exhaustion. He had not won with power, but with compassion. He had faced the ultimate darkness and had answered it not with a bigger fire, but with a greater light. In that moment, she knew that her rigid Jedi code was not the only path. There was another way, his way, the way of the dragon. "It's not over," Lyra said, her voice a low rasp as she pulled off her helmet. Her face smudged with carbon scoring. "The data we stole, the scene we left on Cypio, what we did on Malachor, we're not just on the Black Sun's list anymore. Every bounty hunter, every syndicate, every Imperial agent in the galaxy will be looking for us now. We just declared war on the Empire itself." Naruto looked up, a slow, weary smile spreading across his face. He looked at the faces of his crew, Ahsoka, the Jedi who had found a new path, Alara, the slicer who had seen the soul in the machine, Seer, the scholar who had faced her ghosts, and Lyra, the warrior who had finally found a cause worth more than credits. "Good," Naruto said, his voice filled with an unshakable, unbreakable resolve. "Let them come." They were no longer outcasts. They were no longer running. They were a rebellion of 5. A single, ghost-like ship against the darkness. And the dragon at their heart was finally, truly, awake. Chapter 10 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.